And we are live! Hi everybody! Ray, good to see, glad to have you. Laffy, good to see, glad to have you. Althea, good to see, glad to have you. And Infinite will be joining us soon. Yeah. Episode 2 of our recording of the Encyclopedia Eorzea for as an audiobook. Pop out chat. How's the audio? Ray, I think there's I suspect my audio still might sound quiet to you, but I have double checked and triple checked. I need to keep it slightly lowered down for an audio recording. I don't know why it still sounds so quiet for you. Morning to you, lovely people. Yes, morning. Well, I guess it's morning for them. It's more of afternoon for us. Just finished 87 dungeon on the EU alt. Nice. Making good time. Penny, good to see you, glad to have you. We will get started in a couple minutes here. I'm just going to let people filter in case they're interested. Today we're going to be focusing on chapter 2, or book 2, her history. We'll see how far in we get. We'll try to see if we make good time. We'll do chapter 3. Otherwise, we'll be doing probably one chapter or book per. 11 a.m. is early for me. Well, yeah, okay, it's 2 p.m. here for me, Des. Silly West Coasters. But yeah, last time I thought was pretty rousing success, and listening back to the recording, no major audio issues. Only wanted to turn the gain down a little bit. That's main audio change up. Beyond that, we're going to continue. There is one thing I do want to add, though, which I made sure to go back and add to everything else, which is that I triple checked I was within the material usage license, but I'm going to make a habit of also reading the material use license, 14 material use license at the start, at least the specific clause by Square Enix, stating that Final Fantasy is a registered trademark of Square Enix Holdings Co. Limited. And also, I will have that as well as the Square Enix copyright sign in the description as well. That's the only thing I feel like I majorly forgot from last time. Beyond that, you can also read the material usage license over in their on their website on the Lodestone. I will also, and I know I encouraged this last time, but I will friendly remind and encourage all of you to buy, if you have the funds to do so, the copies of Encyclopedia Eorzea volume. Let's see. I want to turn on the Tom Berry's Tears on loop. The Encyclopedia Eorzea's volume 1, 2, and 3. If you're like me and you're a lunatic, you'll buy not all of them, but all of them twice. Mostly the reason I have 2 copies is because I had the funds to do so at the time, and to be frank, not only are they very pretty, but I am a bit of a... I put things to use, as it were. So on the off chance something happened to them, or they got torn up or spilled on or whatever, I wanted to have a copy at hand. 7 p.m. for you. Yeah, a little bit late. Oh, is it only 7 p.m.? Are you only 5 hours ahead, Ray? That's crazy. Going to have to clean out my inventory and maps later. Going to listen while doing work. Sounds good. Sounds good, Dels. Okay. I'm going to give it 60 more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Also, I need EE1, not EE. As per usual, I will be reading these and going sort of page by page or paragraph by paragraph. If you have questions or lore thoughts or notes, please feel free to dump them over in the chat. I will be checking it periodically. I would definitely love the engagement, or, well, not just engagement on a metric sense, but I love engaging with thoughts and questions or things I might not have thought to notice. So, that is that. I got my water, I got my soda. We are good to go. I have 2 copies of the first 2 because I expected to use them like textbooks. Yeah, exactly, Ray, exactly. I think of them like textbooks too. Okay, final audio check. Check. Let me know if there's anything particularly wrong. Also, let's see. And also, is the music too loud at all? I want... What's a song I want that would be good? What's the music for the Burning Walls? That Fleeting Rays? Yeah, it is Fleeting Rays. Aftermath. Scars of Battle is good. Yeah, let's do Scars of Battle. We're going to be talking a bit about the 6th Astral Era this week, so it'll be good. Music is good. Music's perfect. Okay. Cool. Go ahead and get started. Friendly reminder also, I am not reading off of the PDF. I do own multiple copies of it. I am reading from this. This is just a visual aid in case people need to follow along. Encyclopedia Eorzea, Book 2, Her History. The History of Eorzea. To fully understand the realm of Eorzea, one must first delve into her past and witness the violent cycle of birth and destruction which forged the land from darkness. The First Umbral Era, the Calamity of Wind. Eorzea is characterized by elemental calamities which plunge the realm into short, yet harrowing periods of chaos, known as the Umbral Eras, followed by extended periods of prosperity known as Astral Eras. What then, you may ask, of the land before the first... What then, you may ask, of the land before the first calamity struck? Drawing from the songs and writings of countless civilizations, theologians believe prehistory to be a tempestuous time of uncontrollable creation, overseen by a mercurial god or gods. Creation which abruptly ends with the destruction of all that exists, ultimately allowing for the rise of mankind from the wreckage. Historians and scholars of biological fields, on the other hand, claim that mankind could not have simply appeared, and suggest an evolution of the species in the thousand years preceding the first calamity. What the two groups do, however, agree upon is that modern history begins with the first Umbral Era. It was not until the advent of the Sixth Umbral Era that, by process of elimination, scholars were able to declare with certainty that the elemental calamity which ushered in the First Umbral Era was indeed connected in some way with wind, possibly in the form of terrible hurricanes, tempests, or tornadoes. Recent dealings with the Mughals of Mogholm, in which village elders have spoken of wind-driven disasters previous to the first 5 calamities, serve to further reinforce this theory. The First Astral Era, a time of stone and fire. It is during the First Astral Era that mankind is believed to have learned the essentials for survival, the ability to carve stone tools, and the ability to make fire. Tools allowed for the rise of agriculture and a departure from hunting and gathering, which eventually resulted in the abandonment of nomadic lifestyles and saw the establishment of villages and towns. Within these towns, civilization thrived, and basic sciences such as animal husbandry and simple metallurgy were discovered and refined. As the towns grew, so did the hegemony. As the towns grew, so did the hegemonies that oversaw the town, until finally kingdoms were born. Wait a second, I want to double check I'm correct on the pronunciation of hegemonies. I know hegemon.
Hegemonies.
Hegemonies, okay. I knew I was wrong. It didn't sound right. As the towns grew, so did the hegemonies. I'm gonna need a second. Hegemonies. As the town grew, so did the hegemonies. Oh my god, on a pancake. Okay. As the towns grew, so did the oh god, this is gonna be like laughing. As the towns grew, so did the hegemonies and that oversaw the towns, until finally kingdoms were born. However, kings, as is their wont, are rarely content with what they have, and soon the leaders of the newly formed countries abandoned the creation of tools for the forging of weapons, and the era descended into blood-stained madness. Equipped with picks and axes, historians believe mankind made short work of nature's bounty. Cave paintings dated to the first astral era suggest that the existence of hundreds of now lost species, from two-headed bison to winged curl like scalekin, to fears reaching over 1,000 malms in height. To fears reaching over 1,000 yalms in height. 1,000 malms would be a lot. Edge enemies. I should try that. Yeah, good one, Ray. Sarah, good to see, glad to have you. Oh my god, I'm sure people would tune in with Cook With Me live stream, cooking recipes. I did a cooking stream, and that went well. So yeah, we'll definitely do a cooking stream volume 2 when the volume 2 for the oh my god, the Ultimate Final Fantasy XIV Cookbook volume 2 comes out. We'll do a stream for that. The second Umbral era, the calamity of lightning. Despite the constant wars waged by kings seeking to expand their domains, mankind thrived, its numbers multiplying with each passing summer. To house and feed the people, forests were felled and fields planted. To forge their tools and weapons, mountains were gutted and skies blackened. For countless years, nature suffered this wanton spoiling of the land, until finally, the scales were tipped. Mountains of fire belched forth ink-stained clouds which covered the skies and thrust the realm into eternal darkness. And from the skies fell an endless rain of white-hot levin bolts, which razed fields, boiled lakes, and split the very walls of mighty fortification. And split the very walls of mighty fortifications. For a full 12's moon and a day did nature's fury ring. Fearful that the gods meant to purge the land of mankind once and for all, the people abandoned their homes and towns, and fled underground into caves. Awaiting them here, however, was not salvation, but death, where the caves became breeding grounds for pestilence and plague. As the people sat trapped in darkness, watching their families meet slow, painful ends, they concentrated their efforts on the one path left to them. Prayer. Theologians believe it is this mixture of desperation and focused prayer that gave way to the very first magical incantation. Now fully aware of the land's boundless anger, mankind returned to the heavens for strength. Now fully aware of the land's boundless anger, mankind turned to the heavens for strength. Through prayer, the people of Eorzea discovered that hidden deep within words lies magic. Magic that when fueled by faith could empower. Jojo, good to see, glad to have you. From broken skies fell tears of ash. Well, it's also interesting that they use the term eternal darkness for the calamity of lightning also, which, I mean, it's an appropriate term, but eternal darkness and also Levin associations now with the ninth are very interesting. Jane, good to see, glad to have you. Catching a stream for once, glad you could. I'm sure you would like the Turali Sunrise. I'm sure I would. I did buy that, so when it comes around, I might just cook along with you. Sounds like a plan, Laffy. Nice with new stream. Got my copies of Volume 1 and 2. Didn't realize how big they are. Might be thick enough to be a weapon. Oh, no. You could absolutely kill a man. You could kill a man with the Encyclopedia Eorzeas. They are chonkers. They're each... E1 is 300 pages. Far from home to start. E2 is thinner. E2 I think it's not quite 300, it's more like 250. It is no, oh, technically it is. E2 is 300. No, E2 is 300. That's weird. The pages of it don't feel that thick. It's so weird. They're technically the same length. I wonder if the pages in it are just like thinner stock. Yeah, they're all of the Encyclopedia Eorzeas are all about exactly 300. Not exactly, but close. For some reason, E2 feels a lot thinner. It is weird. Maybe more or less illustrations or something. Or just different paper stock. Okay. These are legit tomes. Yeah, straight up. Yukio, good to go, Lavia. Comes out of craft. You can always kill a man with knowledge. Knowledge seeketh known man. Except for when it's a tome being dropped on their head. Forget the pen. The tome is mightier than the sword. Good. Yep. Reminders, feel free to message in the chat, especially if you have any questions. Asides are plenty okay. However, I will be reading passage to passage. The Second Astral Era. Faith in above. Faith in above. It's what it says. Faith in above. I'm going to alter that a little bit. The Second Astral Era. Faith in the above. And so, through primitive magics did mankind endure, until the skies had finally parted, those showing proficiency in these esoteric techniques rising to positions of power within the communities. The people were drawn to these charismatic leaders, who accredited the fall of the previous era with the faithless kings and their unquenchable avarice. They claimed that only through faith and prayer would they be saved from a similar fate, and thus were the first organized religions born. In but a matter of years, kingdoms, centuries in the making, were replaced with theocracies, populated with men and women eager to prove their worth to the gods. That the divine beings may spare them from the land's wrath. Church leaders convinced the people that through the building of massive temples, monuments, and effigies, would they achieve peace and salvation. To adorn these constructs so that the gods would smile upon them, the people perfected the arts of painting and goldsmithing. To protect these constructs from those who would defy the gods, they solved the riddle of steel to better bask in the gods' light. To better bask in the gods' light, mankind reached high to the heaven. Church commissioned constructions of countless cathedrals, temples, and sepulchres during the Second Astral Era saw the rapid advancement of stonemasonry. The constant mantra of "to the heavens," pressuring early architects to conceive techniques that they might defy the very laws of nature. The Third Umbral Era, the calamity of fire. Faith and fear had given the churches absolute power over the realm. However, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Soon, desire for planetary control rival religion pit Soon, the desire for planetary control pit rival religions against one another, culminating in the advent of an extended dark age of holy wars, witch hunts, and cleansings. Towns were burned, children sold into slavery, all while men and women died in the thousands. With no one to tend the fields at home, crops withered, leaving those few who had not marched to war to starvation. The coffers of the victors swelled with the spoils taken from their enemies, but there was nowhere to spend the newly acquired wealth. The road to rebuilding would be a long one, but the people were convinced that if they maintained their faith, they would rise as they had done once before. By this time, however, the gods had grown weary with mankind. The hubris displayed by the church enough to convince the heavens the people of Eorzea must once again be humbled. In the following moons, the sun grew large, parching parching the earth and sapping the life from all creation. Be it plant or animal, verdant fields and lush forests were reduced to dust. Were reduced to dust-choked wastelands. The people who relied on them for their livelihoods, stricken with famine. The calamity of fire was upon them. Recent discoveries of the skeleton of large plant-eating fauna and the Grand Wake have some scholars convinced that Hydaelyn's modern-day deserts were once a lush grassland, lost in the fires of the calamity that endured the Second Astral Era. One thing that's worth pointing out about that is that the existence of Amarang kind of rejects that, usually being the topography is relatively similar between reflections, though not necessarily identical. So, interesting of note. At this point, anything can be a weapon in 14 so long as it channels Aether. And even if it doesn't. I'm level 60 armor and I have new appreciation and fear for Merwhip. Praise the duck gods so that they don't smite you with lightning. Praise the duck gods! Do we even have ducks? Yes. Where else have we heard absolute power corrupts? Absolutely, yeah. Let the deeds written here and never be forgot, that they may inspire generations yet unborn to strive ever heavensward. Yeah. I should make a note of that in my notes about, page 23. Page 23. Oh, dark. The 9th. Okay. How are we doing on time? I'm just curious. We are 20 minutes in. 20 minutes for 2 pages ain't bad. And they're heavily very text oriented. Let me also do something. I'm gonna bump up. Let me know if the stream quality all of a sudden starts getting better. Oh, absolute corrupt. It's a common saying. I actually don't know the origins of it. Absolute power. I don't know. It's a very common saying. It was Lord Action who wrote it in 1887 letter is most commonly attributed. However, similar ideas about the corruption of influence has been invented. Yeah. You'll hear it. Absolute power corrupts absolutely is at least in America, is a very common saying. So I don't know if you've heard it from something else in specific, Laffy, but it exists in media has for a long time. What's a good Allagan adjacent piece of music while we're reading about the Allagan Empire? I want to think for a second. Okay, I'm gonna set up. Spiral, Prime the Corpse Hall, Dawn of the Era, Sun, Flight. Does anyone know what the Circus Tower theme is called? It's been a while. I know, like, World of Darkness is part of Mania. Hubris. Yeah, we're gonna do Blind to the Dark, because I fucking love Blind to the Dark and Heart of Mania. The Labyrinth, right. Oh yeah, Order as Deciphered would be a good one, Althea, for sure. I was trying to go away from that just because it's more like too much energy to like technically, but we might throw another Order as Decipher if we get tired of this one. Shattered is... Yes, Syracuse Tower. I was thinking... Sorry, Hubris is Labyrinth of the Ancients is what I was thinking. Okay. The birth of an empire. Approximately 5,000 years ago, Eorzean civilization reached what can arguably be considered its peak, at least in the sense of technological advancement and overall influence on the rest of Hydaelyn. With the advent of the Allagan Empire and its spread north to Ilsabard, east to Othard, and south to Mericidia, the following section examines the rise and fall of the realm's most prosperous age. Most prosperous age. Oh, sorry, I just... Let Elio beat out for a second. I just love the rise and rise and rise. It's just... It's very heroic, especially with the World of Darkness being what it is. I love it. Okay, sorry, give me a second. I'm gonna just say I love it because the World of Darkness is like a sad, tragic world. But like, so there's this heroic aspect of us like reaching forth to like get in and get to where we need to be. But there's also this like sadness of also everything that's going along within the Crystal Tower story, as well as what happened with this world. And good combination. Infinite. Good to see. Glad to have you. Saint Koinak's find. Nearly six centuries ago, a determined young man in Ul'dah by the name of Koinak would stumble upon what would prove to be the greatest discovery of the 6th Astral Era. Relics of the Great Allagan Empire, an order of Nald Thal's seminarian. Koinak, an order of Nald Thal's seminarian. Koinak was immensely clever, consistently receiving the highest marks among his peers. The Order had high hopes for the young prodigy, and envisioned him a future leader in the church. These hopes crumbled to dust when Koinak became infatuated with the stories of a long-lost empire, briefly mentioned in Holy Scripture, Allag. Despite being less than a year from graduation, he abruptly abandoned his studies and began a fevered pursuit of knowledge on a subject most in the Order regarded at best an allegory. Turning deaf ear to the pleas of his professors, Koinak was expelled from the seminary and eventually ostracized by his closest companions. This, however, only fueled the young man's passion to prove his detractors wrong. To fund his obsession, Koinak became a merchant, every coin earned put into the acquisition of ancient tomes and the overseeing of exploratory digs in remote locations across the realm. It was not until the year before he passed away, over 5 decades after his search began, that Koinak finally found what he was looking for in the sparsely populated corner of Mordona. Once a laughingstock in academic circles, Koinak was now a hero. Universities begged him to join their staff, while sponsors from across Eorzea showered him with coin to finance future excavations. Further vindication was achieved after his death when he was canonized, not by the Order which forsook him, but by the followers of Ulthik, the Keeper. Koinak's name lives on to this day in St. Koinak's Find, an organization dedicated to the continuation of the eponymous archaeologists' work. The destruction wrought by both the Battle of Silvertear Skies and the subsequent calamity altered the land in such dramatic fashion that locations once submerged under hundreds of yalms of water were now exposed, revealing Allagan ruins which had not seen the light of day for countless summers. The scholars of St. Coinex's find have since begun excavation in these areas in hopes of making their next big discovery. Deathberry, good to glad to have you, and thank you for your membership. Enjoy your emotes. Also, I do really love pointing this out because I think a lot of people forget this. Most, for most of, like, for all the, really most of the Sixth Astral era, for like for a long time, Allag was effectively a myth, and only in the recent centuries was it like, oh no, it was real, but we still know jack shit about it. And only became much more and more aware of it, especially post Seventh Astral Umbral Calamity, because of the fact that, like it was saying in the EE1. Sorry, I'm trying to search the music at the same time. Give me a second. Order. Because of this, but then you had the Silvertear waters of Silvertear Lake decreasing because of what happened with the calamity. You also plus what happened with 10 years, well, 15 years ago, but with Battle of Silvertear Skies. You then have the Crystal Tower rising from the ground too. So we take it for granted, like, oh, we know all about Allag, but like, understanding and revelations about Allag's existence is relatively new on the timeline, and the level of knowledge we have about it has only existed for less than a decade. And it's worth remembering within the confines of the universe. Yeah, the strings are quite exceptional. It's a vibe. I was listening to some house jazz earlier and was scratching similar itch with strings, yeah. Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're having a great day too, Deathberry. Assuming there will be a volume of covering Dawntrail stuff, which, especially with what we last heard from Oda and how Oda's job is much more of an overseer and direct being the lore master, there is, and how well the Encyclopedia Eorzea seem to be selling, there is absolutely no reason to think that there will not be a volume 4 for Dawntrail at all. There's every reason to assume that there would be. As for when it would drop, well, actually, let me finish your question first. As soon as we go to, I hope we get more Wook Evu, clearly the most powerful character of comedy, and just being a chill guy. Yeah, you'll definitely get at least some. You'll definitely get a notion of it, but I wouldn't be surprised if you got documentation from there in it, because if you remember, the Encyclopedia Eorzeas are in-universe documents. Within the confines of that, if anybody's curious when we would see it, in the same way that we kind of know when we'll get FanFest, in that we know we'll get an announcement of FanFest at the next live letter, and we'll probably see FanFest released either between late January or early March would be the most likely window. In that same way, Encyclopedia Eorzeas, if we use, I would use 2 and 1 to some extent as an example, you would probably get it before the patch content is fully out, meaning, or at least announced then, meaning that the information in it would probably be limited up to 7.4 at the latest, if not just ending at 7.3. Which means that we're most likely to see it I wouldn't, it's harder to make guesses on Encyclopedia Eorzea Volume 4, because honestly, there's a real argument to be said that they probably already have it locked and will announce it sometime soon, or they won't lock it until quite late. But I would expect it before 8.0. I don't think they're going to do another 2 like they did with Shadowbringers and Endwalker, because the reason that happened was both because of COVID and needing all hands on deck. There wasn't extra time to really make E3. I would definitely expect the announcement for Volume 4 sooner rather than later, and if it's anything like when they announced EE3, I would recommend turning down your volumes, as I will be making sounds. Raven! Welcome! Good to see you, glad to have you. Enjoy your emails. We killed historical Allagan figures in recent years. Yeah, true, we did. Love how quickly the Allagan Empire went from allegory about hubris to us going, man, fuck these guys, anytime their ruins show up. Now, to be fair, I would point out that we say, man, fuck these guys, because of their hubris. So, you know, we might have taken out the allegory part, but I would say those two ideas were synthesized more than anything. Okay. Continuing on. The Third Astral Era. The rise of an empire. The communities which emerged in the aftermath of the Calamity of Fire, while fearful of the gods, were wary to once again make them the centerpiece of their society. Pursuit of the divine had incurred the wrath of the heavens, so to avoid a similar fate, mankind chose to place distance between itself and the gods. As a result, society began to focus on the individual talents of its people. Faith in the gods gave way to faith in oneself. With this newfound confidence, mankind began producing some of the greatest minds in history. New discoveries in science and technology were being made each day. Civilization was advancing at a rate unseen in the previous two astral eras, and at the forefront stood a man who would see that civilization reach the far corners of Hydaelyn, Xande. Considered by many to be a genius in his own right, the highly ambitious Xande used his uncanny intelligence and charisma to build a nation that, while founded in science, did not deny the magic of the Second Astral Era. Those few descendants of the priests and witches of the Second Astral Era were welcomed and given places where they might hone their skills and wield them for the good of the people. As Xande learned more of magic's potential, he assigned many of these mages to his newly formed army, where their unmatched strength on the battlefield allowed the young leader to subjugate neighboring lands with limited Allagan casualties. In less than a year, Allag was the largest nation in Eorzea, and Xande crowned himself emperor. Upon his death, Emperor Xande was interred in a tomb built within a crystalline cavern located in Mordona. Reasoning behind this being that it was thought that the concentrated levels of pure ethereal energy might repair the corrupted flesh and restore Xande's soul to his new body. The actual consequences were quite different. You may say bad things about them, but man, they had style. They did have style. Natamon just rocking a textbook definition of the word drip. Look at our man. The origins of etherochemistry. It goes without saying that the Allagan Empire would never have survived, let alone expanded and thrived, had it not been for the might of Xande's hand-picked mage. Cadres. Their most important contribution to the Empire, however, was not solely spell-weaving, but the incorporation of their magics into existing scientific principles. Siege engines, enhanced with magics, launched projectiles further, and with far more precision. Ensorcelled tread-wheeled cranes lifted blocks 10 times their maximum load, with a fraction of the manpower. Once the secrets of Aether had been unlocked, they were applied not only to war, but to the everyday societal needs, from construction to medicine, transportation to communication. The field came to be known as etherochemistry, and upon its back would the Allagans ride into a golden age of prosperity. It's always starting to see, so startling to see how easy it is to destroy the laws of nature and how fragile it truly is. I mean, to be fair, they're not really destroying the laws of nature. They're just operating within that and augmenting them in ways that hitherto had been unforeseen. Right? Like, etherochemistry is effectively just... Magic is... We think of magic as non-scientific, and even here they distinguish them as separate, but frankly speaking, magic within 14 is just a form of physics. Yeah, another A, the most important A. Oh, there was another point I wanted to make. Oh, yeah, I just wanted to go back and read that line real quick. Once the secrets of Aether have been unlocked, they were applied not only to war, but to everyday societal needs, from construction to medicine, transportation to communication. The field came to be known as etherochemistry upon its back with the Allagans writing it. It's interesting, because literally what they're describing is just the combination of scientific research and magical research, right? And we call that etherochemistry. But, like, technically speaking, we do what would amount to etherochemistry in alchemy, right? We combine alchemical ingredients if we use magical enhancements in any way to enhance them. That is technically speaking under that definition of etherochemistry. So it's not like etherochemistry is like in and of itself a completely lost arts, but the hyper advancement of it is. You also have to wonder, does within that confines electrope and its use count as etherochemistry? Because if you're augmenting a natural form of material with arcanima to effectively create both a scientific and magical creation, isn't in a definitional technical sense, electrope and its use within the confines of Alexandria is a type of etherochemistry. It is interesting that we distinguish that, but we don't necessarily use that term broadly outside of Allag. Magic is just not well understood at the time science, except in fantasy that can be different. Yeah. Well, and then you also have what? The inverse of that, is it Clark? I'm forgetting which famous scientific author is right, but any technology sufficiently advanced appears to be magic. Oh, yeah, Eorzea, you were saying it. Yeah, Clark's law in full effect and Hydaelyn's Aethers. Yeah. Yeah, it was Arthur Clark. Okay, Arthur C. Clark. Especially considering Go's full-on bodies made of Aether concept instead of going into details of cellular structure, whatevs. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that you have the interesting thing that magic is not just a form of ethereal manipulation, and Aether at its most... Aether is effectively energy, right? Is it reasonable to assume that there's magic toasters that actually toast the toast even with no burnt edges? I think it's reasonable to assume that someone within the confines of Hydaelyn or the Reflections has invented a toaster. Does that toaster work perfectly? It wouldn't be unreasonable for that to exist. The fundamental underlying principle for it to exist in the first place is the most important thing. So it wouldn't be, as per your question, it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume. I cannot think of primary reference points that would, like, everything required to make that exists within the framework of the lore. Even though I can't think of an example of a toaster actually existing. If that makes sense. Inquisitor, good to see, glad to have you. Pretty sure that the perfect toaster was the final boss of the twin. Ah yes, Tycoon, the perfect toaster. The joys of growing up in a nerdy household, yeah. Which is a wild implications on body fluid carrying Aether signatures of parents instead of their DNA. Well, it's possible, but there's also the possibility of genetics still existing. I mean, think about it this way, right? Like, your chromosome at some level is just atoms, right? It is just atoms of elements. And you have a rising complexity beyond that. So with Aether, you could still in theory have genetics. We don't know, it's a little bit still unclear, it's a little vague. But when I say that, I mean genetics as we know them in our world. I'm not saying, there's clearly some level of genetics as like parentage matters in the creating of children, as we've seen. But like imagine, okay, if Aether can make Mithril, right? There's nothing to stop Aether that is energy, but that is corporeal energy, creating manifest products within the human body. I mean, it makes up blood, it makes up all sorts of things. And if Aether can make up blood, there's no reason to think it couldn't make up a chromosome. But it'd still be genetics, just Aether-based instead of chromosomes. Well, my argument is that you could have chromosomes made of Aether, right? So it's still chromosome-based. It's just in the same way that energy released in the real world, Aether is just energy, right? So imagine if you have enough energy in the real world, you make lightning, right? Well, okay, one way it can express itself is lightning. I know I'm grossly oversimplifying. I'm sorry to anyone who knows actual news. Or you can have fire as an expression of energy within the real world. By that same logic, that does not mean that, and wood, it's because of the release of the wood, energy within the wood, right? So you could have corporealized aspects that are all effectively one-to-one as they are in the real world, but the underlying principle is just Aether rather than energy. Tom, good to see, glad to have you. Hope you're having a good day. Good evening. Could they be saving a detailed explanation of genetics for something specific? Could they? Yes, absolutely. Is there possibly an Oda document somewhere out there where Oda goes into deep, like has this all panned out for a reference point? Yeah, absolutely. Likely? I'd say fairly likely. Are they intentionally not saying because they want to do something very specific with it later? I doubt it. Will they do something with it later? Quite possibly. I think it's one of those things more like Time Bubble, where going overly into the specifics of it starts to become, once you define that, you limit a lot of your creative choices, so there's no reason to provide that information. And instead, have it be grounds for questioning and thought. So maybe, good to see, glad to have you. Utaru made a reference to thermocoil boil master one time before the perfect toaster could be. Therefore, the perfect toaster could be out there. Yeah, well, and also there's other foods with references to things like that within the confines of the game. Sorry, I'm just telling my bean. Go do some knitting. There's a lot of there's a lot of also food items that if you read the lore on them kind of imply various ways of cooking that we don't see in the game but exist elsewhere. Kind of like there's the inference of the pictures in Shaloni infer the existence of cameras, which now that we have emotes canonicity always gets weird, but yeah. I'm gonna catch them on chat and then I'm gonna keep reading. Aether-based nuclear reactor. I mean, an Aether-based nuclear reactor is basically just what Allag basically made that. Is the midichlorian and the lightning Aether? Is the mitochondria the lightning Aether? Wonder if you grow artificial organs out of Aether. On second thought, scratch that. We literally have cloning facilities. I was about to say, literally, we have the answer to that. Allag did that. Hello, what a lovely surprise to come home to. Now to eat lunch while listening to lore. There you go. Speaking of, let's get back to the book. We read the origins of aetherochemistry. I'm gonna say nothing for a second to let myself know for editing. This image is an artist's rendition of the Allagan Empire as envisioned by the scholars of St. Coinac's Find. Massive metal frames unearthed at the find in Mordona suggest that the Allagans employed airships, not unlike those used today. A golden age. Xande knew he would not live forever, but he was not about to allow his life's work to come to naught upon his passing, so he carefully groomed his offspring to carry on his legacy. As a result, in the years subsequent to the first emperor's death, the direct descendants of Xande fostered the growth of the empire by dispatching its armies to the far corners of Eorzea and Althar. While there was resistance, the empire made short work of all who stood before it, and in time, there was not a city in the three great continents where the imperial standard did not hang. With no more enemies to fight, Alexander wept, for there was no... I was gonna make a comment about, man, they just straight up Alexandering Xande here, aren't they? With no more enemies to fight, peace prevailed, but people thrived. The focus of the Empire now shifted from expanding its borders, bettering the lives of those who lived within them. One such undertaking involved the construction of a massive array of spires at Silvertear Falls. Designed to gather the very rays of the sun and deliver the energy to the homes and manufactories of the Empire. With the completion of Syracuse Tower, or the Crystal Tower as it would come to be called in the scriptures of later eras, the Allagans began their reliance on myriad machina to ease their daily burden and allow them to concentrate on bettering their minds and their souls. For 3 centuries, not a war was waged on the 3 great continents, and bloodshed, which had spawned the Empire, became but a blemish on a forgotten age. The miracle of etherochemistry had given the Allagans everything they wanted, and more. Yet a man who believes he has everything will not strive to create anew. Lacking the drive that once made it great, society slowly fell into disarray. The people had grown complacent, abandoning learning and drowning themselves in leisure, relegating any and all work to machina. Birth rates plummeted, while suicide became increasingly common. Leaders grew corrupt and complacent, leading to isolated uprising in the worst ways. Leading to isolated uprising in the worst cases. 1, sounds familiar. 2, I would point out that theme, that idea of civilizations losing purpose and falling and, like, obviously is important in places like Endwalker, but it's literally, there are so many themes in 14 that are set up so early and so present throughout that I get frustrated when people are like, oh, why is this expansion about this or that? And I'm like, literally, there has yet to be an expansion in this game that is not operating on one of, like, the 3 primary themes and focuses of the game. Well, Xanday is based on Xanday from FF3. Except for Inquisitor, Xanday's not really based on Xanday from FF3 because Xanday from FF3 has almost nothing going on, and Xanday in FF3 is basically just, I was evil not even evil Emperor, I was evil Magi who changed the world's orientation state. Like, you're not wrong that he is aesthetically, but, like, the backstory for him and, oh, why am I forgetting their names? The twins, not the Alfino and Alice. This is. Maybe I just need to replay the Crystal Tower. It's been a couple of years. If I find the 716 part, I'll have it. Inquiry, Red Bills, Doga and Une. Doga and Une, like, in the Final Fantasy III are complete, like, are nothing, like, only in name, effectively, only the same. Yeah, Doga and Une. Good job. Thanks, guys. These culinarians are capable. I baked an airship. Yeah, I bake tank parts all the time. I'm also kind of interested in seeing how Calyx would interact with Xanday, or imagine if it's Xanday and Calyx would. I don't suspect that they're reflecting the same person. I mean, it's possible, obviously, as long as they're sundered individuals, which we don't know for a fact that their souls are sundered. Because remember, some souls can exist that are not sundered souls. Well, they're sundered souls, but they're not from a soul that was sundered from the time of the sundering. They can be new souls of limited aspect. Just a reminder. I do think that you, while not getting necessarily Xanday, it is interesting to question Calyx's ideology in the face of, and we're not going to talk too much about 7.0 stuff, in the face of the things we go through. I mean, I was so happy. One of the only things I'm going to mention about 7.3 is someone makes the point about how Calyx would have responded to Ultima Thule, and I'm so glad they did, because I had that same thought. Not to be that person, but what about Bosnia? Did they hold off the Allagan Empire? If I recall, was still fighting up to the 4th level calamity. Well done. Let's pull up E3. Because they did fight off Allag, but they pretty soundly also were getting wrecked. And we also know that neighboring Corvos, or neighboring, at that time, it wouldn't have been technically Corvos. It wouldn't, I don't even think wouldn't have even necessarily been Locus Lamentos at that point. But historically, Oh, I don't know the exact segment. Distant lands. No. Watch here. The Kingdom of Bosnia of histories date back to the Third Astral Era. It emerged from a bloody, protracted civil war between the various groups residing in the region, when the land was last united under the rule of a single queen, Gunhildr. Gunhildr was the name and title given to the first monarch, and one of whom followed, all who followed her would inherit. Their peace and prosperity would eventually be threatened by Allagan armies from the west, but the queen and her guard at Gunhildr's blades would ensure Bosnia kept its independence despite its hardships of war. Not good. So emphatically, it stayed independent. Well, they did, if I remember, get pretty hard hit by them. That was what I was trying to remember. It wasn't so much like I know they didn't get conquered, but I know that they suffered for it. And not could prepare them for the fourth Umbral calamity. However, yeah, and so Zadnor got fucked because of the fourth Umbral calamity. So Alex got their the Allagans got their revenge unintentionally in the end. And also, you're not being that person. That's an interesting point. But also, I don't know. Are you saying that in reference to the fact that they managed to conquer the whole of the three nations, the three great continents? Because Bosnia clearly was a pocket that resisted them. I mean, similarities in name and an emperor conqueror of a great nation. Oh yeah, to the Alexander bit, 100%. Also, I'm gonna refresh chat. I have a suspicion it's not updating because that was from a while ago. Correct. Well, being the person in I like Bosnia. No, like Bosnia, good. More people liking more things in the game. Literally, there is nothing in this. I'm gonna say this because I think it's fun to say. If I ever don't like something about this game, if y'all like it, that only makes me happy. I would much rather be the person who's like, I kind of don't like this, and for these critical reasons stuff, and someone says, oh, it worked for me, and here's why. I love it when people love something that I don't like. Because it means more good. It means more people are enjoying it, right? That's good. Much harder when I really like something and feel like I can articulate it and people dislike it. So you never have to feel bad about being like the person who likes Bosnia or even a defender of Bosnia. I mean, there's a lot that's really good about the Bosnia story. My problem is how it's delivered in mechanism of communication. Like, the notes are fundamental reading, not necessarily to understand the plot, but for the plot to mostly land. And there are some choices within it that just feel that are incongruous at points that is a little bit baffling. Partly because it's biting off more than it can chew. But it's not because the Bosnia is bad. Yeah. Bosnia is definitely not bad. It's just, as stories go in 14, every time Matsuno has written a story, Matsuno is trying to write the entirety of a video game's narrative into a section of a game that is not able to contain the whole of it. Now, Eureka, on the other hand. Well, honestly, Eureka's story is only a problem because Baldur's Gate Arsenal can't be experienced by the layman. Like, if there had been a story mode, if there had been, like, a normal mode for Baldur's Gate Arsenal and a savage mode, same way for Forks Tower, it would have been that. There'd be no problems with the story. Matsuno is funny that way. Matsuno is funny that way, Will. Will, good to go, have you. And I also feel like I come across as a Matsuno hater, and I'm not. I actually like it a lot. I'm really, really excited. I've played through Tactics twice, and I've kind of bounced off of it. I'm very, very, very excited for the remaster, and hopefully this time I hit it. I love Final Fantasy XII. I think Final Fantasy XII also is kind of a clusterfuck in terms of pacing and structure as well, though. I do not dislike Matsuno, but I do have a problem that almost everything he writes for is delivered in a way I find frustrating. But that's me, and I can understand and imagine the same frustrations I have being grounds for someone's particular enjoyment. Also, I think when you have the lore nerd saying, stop putting things in the lore notes, you think, there may be at that point that, like, maybe we should make a little bit stuff less like lore notes and a little bit more primary characterization and plot. Just a thought. Is Bosnia bad in a good way rather than bad in a bad way? No, I wouldn't say Bosnia's bad. I would say Bosnia has a lot of really good stuff, but it's flawed. That's my opinion. There's not a lot in this game. There's exceptionally little in this game that is actively bad. The worst you're gonna get is fine. Like, there's not a lot in A Realm Reborn that's actually bad. Now, you could argue that fine is almost worse than bad because fine is boring and boring is the worst thing you can be. Like, that's fair. But there's not a lot in 14 that's bad. And there's very little in 14 that, if it is fine, doesn't actually still enhance something else later on. As an example, the amount of things in A Realm Reborn where you're like, why am I doing this? And then you realize later that actually it was a wonderful and powerful setup for Alamigo and Ishgard. Case in point. No, bad isn't good in the newer sense. Not bad isn't bad. Dallas, you've completely lost me. Paladin questline found dead in a ditch. Okay, Paladin questline isn't bad. The problem is it's just fine, and then most of it is a gladiator questline. Look, you won't catch me not saying that Paladin is probably one of the worst quest lines. As a Paladin main, I will absolutely. When it comes to, like, well, I guess if you add Picto and Viper and Sage and Reaper, it gets a little bit more complicated. But, like, broadly speaking, Red Mage, Scholar, and Dark Knight are the best job quest lines in my opinion. Just like Matsuo wants to wrap up the Ogre Battle series and Evilise. Yeah. And he's been trying to do it repeatedly for 20 years. Worse than Dancer? Oh, yeah. I mean, Dancer's great. Like, Dancer's really good. I can imagine someone disliking Dancer. But, like, in terms of, from a lore standpoint, and from a, what is the class flavor and intent and ideology around the resuscitation of people's spirits, Dancer's good. That doesn't mean you have to like it. But I'm saying, like, the Paladin questline's bad, not because even, like, from a lore standpoint, there's really interesting stuff in the Paladin questline. The Paladin questline's bad because the 1 to 50 is okay. The 50 to 60 is basically a murder mystery that kind of goes nowhere and is, you know, it's okay. And then the 70 is great. The problem is it's not a Paladin questline, it's a Gladiator questline. And then the capstone is the theme of protecting something, which in and of itself is great, but that the story up to this point has not been emphasizing very well, and also is more oriented towards the Gladiator story than it is the Paladin story. Yeah, the Red Mage is very good. Scholar is very, very good, and Dark Knight is broadly probably the best, in my opinion. I'll defend Paladin. You can absolutely defend Paladin Westside. Go for it. I'm only pointing to its flaws. Again, I'm a Paladin. I love a lot about it. I'm a Paladin main and have been for years. Lore standpoint, I was thinking of how fun it is or isn't. I would say the solo duties, well, then, I mean, definitely. I'd say the solo duties and Dancer are fun. Or maybe that's just me. It's either just Paladins arguing who is this. I mean, here's what the thing is, I will say. Almost none of the tanks, they get a little bit better as they go along. But the problem with the tanks in, is that none of them really have you tanking. Some of them are fun, like some of the like Dorgono stuff is fun with Warrior. Gunbreaker has some good. Gunbreaker does a little bit more with the protection aspect, which I appreciate. But I wish the tank stuff was even more on the let's make you tank, ass tank. Yeah. Ninja got silly. Ninja did get silly. That you're not wrong. To be fair though, Ninja was always Arch. Since Karasu is what he is. Defending Paladin questline, ironic. To elaborate, I defend it as the following. The AR quest, then switching to Dark until Heaven's Work wraps up, then jumping back to Paladin, they switch back to... Well, okay, wait. So if you're defending it on the merits of skipping parts of it, then I don't think that's... I may have misunderstood, Will, but if the defense here is I swapped off of it for part of it, I don't think that's a very good defense. Yeah. And the thing is, if Karasu lands for you, then the Ninja questline's great, I think, broadly speaking. Are we never going to get another yellow job quest? You will almost certainly not see another yellow job quest in terms of you... I do not imagine for any reason they will change off of the role quest system. The role quest system allows them to maintain... Okay, so here's this. It's not... If they added more job... They're not going to add one quest for one job because other people are going to feel unhappy with that. which they've said. I don't remember when they said that, but they said that. And the problem is, every expansion, you're not just making, you would have to do more and more and more and more jobs. That's a lot of writing, a lot of dev time. The role quests are, just to be frank, whether you like them or not, better. The role quests are a much better system and have been for so many reasons. One of the reasons, they can put all their focus on the quality of 5 specific quests, specific to the roles. 2, they can design the jobs around not specific job. They can design the quests not around specific jobs, but instead their role and what you're supposed to be doing. Making sure tanks tank, making sure range, making sure casts cast, making sure healers heal, right? Melee, use your positionals, right? The role quests as a system are better from a ability to maintain and design standpoint, and also a way to enliven and focus on the narrative of the area. But we will continue to see whatever the 2 new jobs or 1 new job we get in the next expansion, we'll get a job quest for sure. Yeah. I wouldn't mind checking back in with some of the other job heroes. I would love to check back into them. I just don't think you have to make them job quests to do that. To be fair, most of them still hang around, and if you talk to them, their conversations change patch to patch. Like, Zolka. I just returned to him recently and talked to him, and he had different conversations from Endwalker to Dawntrail. I know that's not what people are asking for, but a little more brother in blue icon. Gunbreaker literally had you being a bodyguard throughout the entirety of it. Yeah, and I don't mean theme. I just mean the specific doing. I to be clear, when I say tanks tanking, I don't mean narratively. Narratively, I think they're fine. I'm talking about mechanically the tank quest lines for jobs don't actually teach you to tank that well. I think the role quests do it better, and they're not amazing. Karasu was Hildebrand Light. No, Karasu is Arch. Like, Karasu is like playing into a long history of the evil, over-the-top archetype ninja. Like, literally, if you want to know why the ninja quest line it is like it is, just remember that they studied Naruto when they were figuring out the animations and the quests. On the matter of jogging it with the plot Heaven's Word and Dark Knight, then going back and doing Heaven's Cloud Quest, then doing I wouldn't mind checking back on some of the It's been 20 whole levels since the level 81s. I think we're due on one every 2 or 3 expansions. No. Okay, so I don't think that. So Laffy, I get what you're saying, but I think that really misses how development works. You're not going to see them go back to that and forego role quests, and you're not going to see both role quests and job quests. They have a system that they can maintain that has a specific clip that allows them to have a writer write stories within a refined and specific cadence, and for them to produce it on a known timescale, which is something that 14 prizes. I'm not saying there will never be any conversation with any job quest NPC, but as usual, clip me if I'm wrong, laugh at me. I should be laughed at if I'm wrong here in my certainty. You're never gonna see another job quest at the cost of role quests. It's not gonna happen. For a lot of developmental and, frankly, successful reasons, if nothing else, in part that as a system of you doing the role quest in order to get the dyeable armor also works from a good, yeah. No more role quests isn't what I'm asking for, just checking once. Yeah. I know you're not asking for no more role quests, exactly, Laffy. More my point is, you're not going to get job quests without losing role quests, unless you get a check-in, but those check-ins won't. You would be more likely to get them in patch, really, to be frank. And the thing is that, especially when they're already pulled thin, I don't think you'll see them. Again, I'm not shouting down the desire for it. I'm just saying, like, I think the closest you're going to continue to see is updates on the conversations. I think part of that's one of the reasons you also saw all of the quest NPCs in all throughout Endwalker, is that that's kind of like the end of their story. Yeah. I'll take what I can get. Yeah. I'm going to try to finish up chat, then I'll keep going. What? Nah, hard disagree. Job quests gave each job flavor. Where did I say that they did? Romeo. Ninja is brilliant in absurdity. No one expects the Joker to be the real threat. Like WoW Order Hall. I don't know if you're trolling me on that one, because WoW Order Halls are famous for the fact that they gave flavor but then weren't maintained. So, like, it's funny because, like, I agree that they were great for flavor in Legion, but kind of famously problematic in terms of maintaining, which is kind of my point. Return from Bard questline, and that did not mean to sound as saying that accusing of trolling was not as flippant as I meant it to be. I'm more just like thrown off. Yeah, some of the job quests, especially around the Stormblood, could feel very fillery, or oh god, how do you get into Othar Malamigo? Yeah, my problem is not the quality of the job quests. I love all the capstones. Some are better than others. I love all the job quests. I'm just saying that I'm thinking from a developmental standpoint, the role quests are more successful broadly at what they set out to do in a way where the jobs kind of just continue to like keep rolling. There wouldn't be a lot of benefits to continue to just keep stretching out the Dark Knight role quests, especially when you would not have anyone above you. Like, remember, the important thing too is arguably within the confines of those stories and the world, there's not a Dark Knight stronger than you. There's not a Paladin stronger than you. There's no one to teach you, right? A return for Bar questline would be nice given a certain Wandering Minstrel. Well, the Wandering Minstrel's been around since the Realm Reborn. So, unless you mean a different one than the Wandering Minstrel, unless you mean, like, specifically, you'll have to let me know what. Yeah, some of the job quests, especially around the Storm, but don't want to be taught anything. I want a mini story about them. But I don't want to be taught anything. I want a mini story about them. I'm just going to say from a macro standpoint, like, while the desire for that's perfectly fine, Romeo, I feel like that ignores it ignores that you are getting a mini story about your role. And also, if you just get a slight mini story about the job that keeps extending it out and out, it has less and less value because you don't occupy a position where there's anything to change. And then on top of that, with role quests, you have the benefit of, and again, I'm not saying you have to like role quests, like the role quests or their narratives. I do, but my point is, my argument isn't so much about whether or not there's any value inherently to a job quest story. My point is more to do with the benefit to the game as a whole, its player base and the developers, compares to it. Yeah. Guest Paladin wrapped up okay, barring the whole new order of free Paladins, yeah. Check-ins are nice to have, but we get more and more jobs, it's going to get harder and harder. Yeah. I'm curious to have a conversation of Paladins in Eastern versus Western media. Yeah, well, this is a very interesting conversation for sure, so Sorry, I kind of dropped in the conversation. I was late. Yeah, no worries, Romeo. I was just saying that I prefer job quest or role quest. Sure. And that's valid. I'm not going to argue your preference, obviously, right? That's valid to have that preference. I prefer, at this point, role quests to job quests because I loved that there were capstones to those stories. They were able to end, and instead of extending them out, they told stories about your relationship to the role you occupy. Now that's a narrative standpoint, as well as the ability to focus on narratives with specific themes. If you look at, for instance, Shadowbringers and all the role quests and how they funnel towards a specific intent. You look at all the stories in the Endwalker ones and specific intent towards Greece and loss and recovery. And you look at Dawn Trail and you look at specific intent towards apathetic people who are either venal or out for themselves at the cost of everybody else, like thematically. But then also, because they're built for roles, they're actually making people learn their jobs. And frankly, that's something that 14 needs. To just be frank, the amount of tanks I see who don't mitigate, the amount of healers who just cast Cure 3, the amount of DPS who just don't do basic DPS things is such that I do think that's just a better good. Yeah. But yeah, again, it's totally valid to prefer the job quest. I think I have strong reasons as to why I think the current role quest system is better for, also from a developmental standpoint, much more sustainable in the long term. Because we're going to have, what, 23 jobs? Maybe I'm leaving off there. Going into, and not including limited jobs, going into 8.0. And that's just not sustainable. You will get, I can promise you, if you felt some of the job stories were a little bit like nothing-ish in Stormblood, if you tried to get every job and quest story here in going into 8.0, there are going to be a lot that are just fluff, and not even fluff in a good way. Like, fluff can be a good thing. If they stick to job quests, they'll need more and more resources to make a reasonable story arc for each class or expansion. There will only be more drain on more classes added. You will see, not only would you get job quests in that way, you would probably see not only world quests go away, but you would see fewer things like the Corn Servant. You wouldn't see things like, you wouldn't see extra side quests that exist now, because the people who, everything's an opportunity cost, right? The people who would write those interesting side quests or things that we do would be instead put towards that. Alternative could be exploring the role's place in the world as a simultaneous change, mentoring newbies, and learning a thing or two from them. Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to solve it. And again, also, I want to be very clear, the desire to be able to recheck in with those people is totally fair and valid. Like, I'm not trying to shout that down. I just would point out that everything in the game is an opportunity cost. To do that for every job, because you're not gonna get Dark Knight gets that and then no one else does. To just be frank, because that would be a bunch of people would be very unhappy. Instead of, you'd have like 20 to 50% of Dark Knights would be like, oh cool, awesome. And then 50% who didn't even play and don't care. And then you would have every other job being like, why the frick do they get it and we don't? You know? So you would have to see all of them. So you could lose something like Hildebrand or something else that's intensive around development. But yeah, that's just the reality of it. You're the strongest there is. Yeah, the notion of you're the strongest there is has been around since level 30 for most jobs. You're the strongest there is. Yes, my point more, Laffy, is that like if you look at like, let's take Dark Knight for instance. You have things to learn from the Soul Crystal that are from Dark Knights who are above and stronger than you, right? Also, to be fair, the White Mage one isn't you're the strongest there is. It is you are a particularly strong White Mage, also person who has a perspective from outside the wood, right? Like, you know? Like, I'm not saying that we're not the strongest White Mage, but like, we're probably at that point not a stronger White Mage than Connie Senna. And even if we are, it's that our unique perspective. And then also we got, Ipajal-san? I forget his name. But the spirit within the Aether Crystal can teach us something, right? Like, there are people who can mentor us. Now, that's not to say people who are weaker than us cannot be in any way a mentor. More request, Elio. Another Allagan-themed tune, please. Yeah, we can change order on Decipher. If at any point the music drags on, please tell me. Speaking of, I'm going to shut the frick up, and I'm actually going to... we're actually going to keep going. Oh, but what will we do now without it? Let's see. Pause. No. What's a good musical theme from Allag? Obviously, Ultima Scions and Sinners, right? I'm gonna do Teardrops in the Rain for a bit. At some point, I'm gonna do the Snow Cloak theme because I want to chill. Atoa can't. Thank you, AC. Feel like Backbench I had a good capstone on its story. Yep. But yeah, again, always feel free to join in the conversation. Just because I disagree with you guys does not mean I don't want to hear your opinions, and just because I'm providing my reasons why is not a shout down for yours. You should definitely ardently feel what you feel. Here to celebrate the game. This is a good theme for Allag. Plays Maki theme. Yeah. I mean, look, they controlled they controlled Yefame at some point. Also, hey, I'd point out that the Maki do a lot of the exact same mistakes as Allag. Right? I know I did. I know I play, you know, they summon a bunch of Void Send, get technologically advanced, go to war, ends up fucking them over and causing an Umbral calamity. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I can back up my choices. Okay. So we ended at a golden age. In the years preceding the 7th Umbral era and the reemergence of the Crystal Tower, scholars had very little to draw upon regarding the sun-collecting spire's appearance. Early attempts by artists commissioned by St. Square Enix to recreate the Crystal Tower. I'm going to start the from the top. In the years preceding the Seventh Umbral era and the re-emergence of the Crystal Tower, scholars had very little to draw upon regarding the sun-collecting spire's appearance. Early attempts by artists commissioned by Square Enix Holdings Co to recreate the Crystal Tower, while beautiful, were ultimately far different than the actual construct. Counterpoint to your counterpoint. What exactly was Amdapur really annoying about? Other than that the Magi said we don't like them. Also, I'd point out that, like, both from an EE1 standpoint, in-game standpoint, and, like, Occult Crescent standpoint, literally, they, like, actually, let me say this out, because I get why because, like, oh, they were so artsy-fartsy and fuck them. I will point out there's literally a note, I think in Occult Crescent, that just said, nah, Mach just wanted their land. Like, Mach just wanted control. It's either in the Occult Crescent or it's some recent note, I remember, that, like, explicitly stated, like, nah, it was Mach's fault. Amon's scheme. The Emperor was becoming crushed. The Empire was becoming crushed under its own weight, inching ever closer to destruction, while its people sat glassy-eyed in their homes, dangerously dependent on the luxuries science afforded them. There was one man, however, who was not about to stand idly by as oblivion crept ever closer. A talented technologist by the name of Amon. Amon believed that when the Allagans needed to save them, Amon believed that what the Allagans needed to save them was not another invention or technological breakthrough, but a strong leader. A leader who could ignite the fires in their hearts of men and wake society from its apathy-induced stupor. A leader the likes of Emperor Zande first. Instead, however, of waiting until another individual with the qualities of Zande appeared, Amon believed better success would be had with a more direct approach, resurrecting Zande himself. Techniques to temporarily restore life to mortified flesh by growing it anew had already been discovered by Allagan scientists. Amon believed, however, a temporary return would not be enough to ensure a rise from the ashes of the once mighty Allagan Empire. What were needed were the secrets to eternal life. And so Amon began a series of experiments, combining chimerobiology and cloning, in a last desperate effort to achieve immortality. In the early stages of these experiments, he used brigands and revolutionaries to test his newly developed techniques. Once his methods had been refined, he moved next to the Emperor's bloodline, and finally to his own self. The results were promising, prompting Amon to move to the second stage of his plan, the unearthing of Zande's tomb, and the resurrection of the Emperor. Utilizing the solar energies collected in the Crystal Tower, combined with his newly perfected vivification techniques, Amon achieved the impossible. Zande walked Eorzea once again. Clearly Skolek propaganda. Yeah. Okay. Ooh, Emerald Labyrinth. Let's do the Emerald Labyrinth. That sounds good. Maki may deal with demon. Counterpoint and a bit. Yeah, clearly Skolek propaganda. Ah, yes, clearly it was the fault of every other nation in the 5th Astral Era. It was not Mach at all. This is one of the part of the lore that always confused me. How did Amon find the right soul and memory of the original Zande millennia after passing? He should have been reincarnated or washed away. That's actually quite simple. Well, no, it's not simple. I would point to, very specifically, one, a soul can exist in the ethereal sea for long periods of time and resist oblivion. We know that, not necessarily in a long period of time, but we know that with people such as Asahi. Secondarily, as a possibility, I would scroll all the way back, well, not all the way back, but a page back, to where Zande was entombed. Upon his death, Emperor Zande was interred in a tomb built within a crystalline cavern located in Mordona, reasoning behind this being that it was thought that the concentrated levels of pure aether energy might repair the corrupted flesh and restore Zande's soul to his new body. The actual consequences were quite different. The possibility is that either the soul itself became stored somewhere else outside of the ethereal sea or managed to linger. We've hypothesized this a lot because I know I had that exact same question, Dallas. We've never really had a satisfactory answer, but I do think there's easy ways to get around that, either with Xanday's will and disposition, him resisting the tide of the ethereal sea to be pulled into rebirth, which we know is a thing that can happen. Alternatively, his soul being stored somewhere else. Yeah, not even Mother Hydaelyn wanted to deal with Asai. Yeah. Yeah, the Emerald Labyrinth's pretty good. Am I right? Emerald Labyrinth... Is the Emerald Labyrinth... I know it got used in... It gets used in places like Heaven on High, but if I'm not... Or not Heaven on High, Palace of the Dead. If I'm not mistaken, didn't it date back to 1.0? Yes, it was. Was it the 1.0 Gridania theme? Yes, plays in the Black Shroud before patch 1.18. Yep, okay, I was right. It was the original Gridanian theme. Mach could never. Mach could never. Can a country have hobbies? Yes, the domination of other nations. The best of hobbies. I can accept resisting, but not fell ever for longer than reasonable. Well, we don't know. So I would say don't apply your fundamental knowledge. It's very easy to think we know everything about the ethereal sea because we've seen it for a slim instance of time and how it tends to function. There are possible outcomes beyond that. The other being, to your point, memory storage could have existed in some way. Not the endless, but like memory aether storage could exist. Amon could have pulled on that. He could have created Xanday a la how ancients are risen to office, right? Where their memories of them and recollections of them are stored in a crystal, then provided to a soul. So you could imagine that maybe Xanday's soul wasn't Xanday's soul, and it was the recollections of Xanday throughout history, or memories stored within crystals. Or there's a lot of different ways that it could possibly make sense, while staying within canon. Just because there has not been something explained yet does not necessarily mean that it is unexplainable. Okie dokie doke. Seeing as we're talking about Mordona right now, this works well. I mean, Amon was Amon. He was able to make a clone of himself that presumably thought he was Amon. Yeah. Now the cool question is, was the fake Amon, did the fake Amon have a fake soul, or was he a clone much like the others? Based off of the fact that they refer to him as a clone, I assume he was soulless. Amon, one of the few great minds in the land that had seen the slow yet steady numbing of its people. Let's try it. It's tiny text. Amon, one of the few great minds in a land that had seen the slow yet steady numbing of its people's intelligence. Amon long lamented the sorry state of Allag, concentrating his early scientific efforts on developing medicines to increase mental capacity. He soon realized that it was not knowledge that the Allagans lacked. If anything, they had too much. What his people lacked was a leader. With a renewed sense of focus, Amon shifted his studies to the field of vivimancy, and soon was conducting experiments on his own flesh in order to attain his final goal, the resurrection of Xanday I. Scylla, a high-ranking archmage of the Allagan Imperial cadre. Scylla was tricked by Amon, a lifelong adversary within the Imperial court, into participating in the mad technologist's experiments with immortality. Promised never-ending life and a limitless power, Scylla begrudgingly agreed to the alteration of her corporeal form, only to wake from the anesthetics to find snapping maws of wild hounds, creatures most despised by the mage, where her own head once had been. Glacia Labelos, one of Amon's few voluntary subjects, Glacia Labelos, commander of the Imperial Honor Guard, was fiercely loyal to the Empire, enjoying himself by personally tracking down and mercilessly crushing any and all seeds of rebellion. The experiments were successful in granting the commander immortality, ensuring eternal service under the great Emperor Xanday. However, Side effects saw his already dark mind further fevered. General Phlegethon, leader of one of the many rebellions that erupted in the waning years of the Allagan Empire. Imperial annals paint Phlegethon as a murderous villain. Writings of the common folk, however, reveal the general's status as a hero of the people. Adored though he was, the revolutionary leader was eventually captured by agents of the Empire, and his body was forcibly altered through sorcery and science. His mind broken and conditioned to obey. Man, fuck Allag. Oh, actually, we're doing plenty okay on time. I'll be curious to see if we make it through one chapter. Honestly, if we can even make it to the timeline, that'll be good. Sure they can explain just not the extent of Rise of Skywalker, at least like Death Star Dagger or Horrible Plot. Her every breath is laced with magic. Oh yeah, because of the idea that Scylla is one of the souls being consumed by oh my god, P9. One of the rivers of hell, or the underworld. You guys will get me. Do we know what the Allagans were? Like Amon or Alizin here? Some races that once existed but won't exist. No, so we know that their population was partly here. The implication from Amon and from other places is that the Alizin population would have been there as well, seeing as they were central to the Eorzean. Lived in central Eorzea. The broad consensus is that the population of Allag in specific, its dominant population, would have been Alizin and Hyur, primarily Hyur. If you look in the flashbacks of one Amon during Endwalker, you specifically see Hyur, as well as people like, oh god, not Oscar, not Otis, 5.4. I'm not doing well on names today. Kokaidos, thank you, Dallas. But so we know Hyur's for a fact. And with Amon's ears, it's hard to know because he was chimerically altered, but it seems fairly likely that Alizin were a part of the population as well. We know Mikote were used for slave labor, so while they were not necessarily a part of the ruling class, they were technically a part of its dominion, because they ruled all of Othard, Ilsabard, and Aldenard. It's fair to assume that there were most of the other races under their sway. At this point, the Lalafell had not arrived from the South Sea Isles, so that you wouldn't have to worry about Lalafell as much. The Roganin would not have come down for Eorzea, so Roganin wouldn't really be a thing. The Zayla might have been under dominion of them in Othard. It's hard to know for sure. The House of the Crooked Coin and the Burn kind of existence implies that Zayla would have been under their domain, but again, not necessarily of Allag. You know, kind of like how the Garland, you can be part of, controlled by Garlemald, but you're not Garlean necessarily. Viera would have been Viera-ing. Let's see, any of the races I've missed? Roganin covered, Lalafell covered, Hyur covered, Alizin covered, Mikote covered, Ara covered. Hrothgar we know were rebelling and stayed rebellious in Bosnia, so no. And then Viera. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so primarily Hyur and Alizin. And for certain, primarily Hyur. The Alizin population is of question. Loporrits, yes. The Allagans were obviously completely they were all Loporrits. They were all bunnies. Have you seen Amon's ears? Clearly. The Namazu? Yeah. What do you think is behind Amon's mask? Yes. Moving on. Let's find it. Eyes southward. Amon's genius and obsessive nature made dangerous bedfellows, leading to the death of countless subjects, before ultimately bearing fruit. Not only was Xande resurrected from his millennia-long slumber, but had achieved both immortality and an otherworldly vigor in the process. Over the next few days, the Emperor was briefed by Amon of the myriad changes the realm had seen in the 1,000 years since his death. The advancement of civilization, the extent of the Emperor's reach, and the state of her people. The extent of the Empire's reach, and the state of her people. Once aware of what he had to work with, he moved quickly to right the ship, starting with the assassination of the current emperor and the loyalists to the regime, by the Glacia Labelos-led Imperial Honor Guard. With the throne reclaimed and potential challenges to Xande's authority conveniently disappeared, the new emperor wasted little time restoring the hitherto impotent Imperial army to its former size and strength, and ordering it on its first mission, the full-force invasion and occupation of the southern continent of Mericidia. Just as Amon had predicted, Xande's return had revitalized the Empire, igniting a fire in the hearts of the complacent and providing them with new purpose. The army's ranks swelled with new recruits. Manufactories began hiring manual laborers to meet increased demand for weaponry, and scholarly circles were abuzz with new discoveries and innovation. The Allagan Empire would be great once again. The road to greatness led south. The Allagan Empire would be great once again, and the road to greatness led south. The Mericidians, however, were not about to give up their homes without a fight. While the Empire's first wave of attacks were largely successful due to the fact that they were unexpected, subsequent raids into Mericidia proved more difficult. The native peoples of the southern continent banded together under the leadership of the dragon, who also claimed dominion in Mericidia. While without equal on the three great continents, the Imperial army's chimerical war beasts were no match for the dragon's fiery breath, and countless casualties were suffered. This, however, only served to further motivate the scientists of Allag in their ungodly pursuit of might through biological manipulation. And it was not long before they had created abominations which exceeded the might of the Mericidian horde. In a decisive and bloody battle, the Allagans slew the Dawnworm, Bahamut, paving the way for immediate occupation. Or so they believe. I'm gonna write down a note there. Because they do say a specific decisive battle. I wonder if we'll ever learn about the specific decisive battle in which Bahamut. I mean, whenever we go to Mericidia, I'm sure we will. Kalia, a product of both mechanical and biological ingenuity. Solid steel aberration, Kalia, was developed in the Etherochemical Research Facility, Nazisla, to combat the dragon legions of Mericidia. This mechanized Hydra could withstand not only attacks from razor-sharp fangs and talons, but also the white-hot flames of Dragon's Breath, and proved invaluable in the campaigns waged on the southern continent. So effective was the creation, the Allagans would eventually place one within Bahamut's metal jail to guard the Great Worm. There's no Kalia is one of the bosses of the Binding Coils. Trolley races would have been untouched, I assume. We don't know. We just don't know. The answer is there's no history to... The only thing... There is a blue mammal jaw that is based off of one of the enemies in FF3 in the Crystal Tower. However, it's not clear if that's supposed to be a mammal jaw or an example of asset reuse. So we can't know for sure. If a mammal jaw is in the Crystal Tower, it implies that either they came over from the Tyrol or were used by them. And the histories of Tyrol that we know of just don't date back that far. Anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't really have much in the way of history for Tyrol outside of what would be late 5th or Astral era. and so it's impossible to say whether Allag ever touched base on there. We haven't seen any installations or anything, but it could be quite possible to, it would be quite reasonable to assume that Xanday's focus was on Mericidia and that they would have known about Tyrall, but first and foremost conquering Mericidia. But since they fell not too long after conquering Mericidia, they may have just not had the time to do so. Interesting idea while AFK. Many of the Allagan clones we fight show off some skin, but not Amon. Could be covering up the side effects of his self-experiments. Oh, I'm certain that he's covering up in part the side effects of his self-experiments, for sure. Strange sentence structure there, even I was mentally tripping up. Yeah. No, I think the fact that he wears the mask and stuff is definitely in part covering up that like, I don't know how monstrous he is, but he used chimera biology and magics and science in order to make his body, like, Xanday used to be normal. Like, Xanday didn't always look like Xanday does now, wasn't as huge as Xanday is now. Same with Amon. Xanday would have used to have been a hero. The Warring Triad and Bahamut. With the dragons all but defeated, the Mericidians turned to their gods for salvation, invoking terrible beings known as Icons in one final attempt to rid their land of the Allagan. While there is no record of any Icon, currently known as Primal, summonings on Mericidia prior to the Imperial invasion, immediately following the fall of Bahamut, multiple tribes were simultaneously successful in calling their deities from the Aether, suggesting that a third party may have been involved in the passing of the specific knowledge required to do so. Of these icons, 3, Sephiroth, the Fiend, Sophia, the Goddess, and Zervan, the Demon, or the Warring Triad as they would come to be called, would prove the most problematic for the invaders from the north, temporarily driving the Allagans back to the Mericidian coasts. Important to note that does not say that they were the only. It is interesting to, I mean, obviously it could also refer to Bahamut since that would be a fourth, but, like, it is possible to infer from that there were other primals beyond the Warring Triad. A furious Xanday demanded a solution from his Imperial cadre of mages, threatening to kill a man a day until they fulfilled his seemingly impossible request. How could one rid the world of a being that could simply be resummoned the moment it was slain? In their desperation, the mages turned to the very enemy they fought for inspiration, and before too many of their brethren had succumbed to the Emperor's wrath, they discovered a new branch of spellcasting, which would ultimately become the roots of modern-day summoning, and utilized it to neutralize the power of the Warring Triad by imprisoning them, instead of defeating them outright. Victory over the Icons should have marked the end of conflict in Mericidia, but the southern continent was not yet willing to concede defeat. Devastated by her mate Bahamut's demise at the hands of the Allagans, the worm Tiamat endeavored to resurrect the Dawn Dragon in the same manner that the tribes of Mericidia summoned the Icons, as a deity. What rose from the ashes, however, was but a shade of the Duskworm's beloved Bahamut. Twisted with rage, the Great Worm unleashed his fury on the Allagans, erasing almost immediately any advantage the Empire had seized. Bahamut. One of the first brood, Bahamut lived for countless centuries as a ruler of the southern skies, until being slain by the power-hungry Allagan Empire. When the Duskworm Tiamat learned of her beloved's untimely fate, she, with the aid of Mericidia's remaining dragon horde, chose to ignore the warnings of her kin and attempted a summoning of the spirit of Bahamut. Her sorrow and anguish, combined with the rage of her kin, however, erupted the spirit as it returned from the life stream. The result, a mad tyrant, little resembling what had once been the Dawn Worm. Mon couldn't fix Sante's balls. I think he's not. I don't think he's balding. He just has a high he just has a high hairline. Like, I have a really high hairline too, and I've had this hairline since I was like my whole life. Dude, the amount of times I've met people who like see someone with like a high hairline and they think they're balding, and it's like, no, that's just, you know, genetics. Just lots of people have a like very like high hairline. I didn't realize so many people thought like having a high hairline or like even a widow's peak was like a myth. Like, yeah, no, super cool. Amon had the same bull cut as Asahi. That's why he took over his body, and that's why he always covered his face. Covering that beautiful elephant face, yeah. Zero, good to glad to have you. Imagine if we go to Mara City and see a statue of Dawn War Bahamut. I don't think that's likely, Zero. I think that is a guarantee. I will tell you, if we go to Mara City, which I will say for sure we are going to Mara City in 8.0 or 9.0. I'm hopeful in 8.0. There are reasons I worry, but 8.0 is my hope. I will guarantee you when we go to Mara City, one of the maps will have a Bahamut statue somewhere. I will guarantee it. It might be somewhat broken, but there will be a Bahamut statue. Victory in Meracidia. Emperor Xande found great joy in the ever-changing tide of battle, and is claimed to have said that he never felt more alive than during the slaughter of the Meracidian campaign. He also believed that a man was only as strong as those he slew, and therefore would welcome the onslaught of his enemies with open arms, using them as opportunities to gain even more power. The war with Meracidia fueled the advancement of Allagan technology, and deepened the Empire's knowledge of arcane magics. Not only could a dragon or an icon now be captured, but it could be tamed, controlled. Its very life essence could be tapped and used as a source of seemingly endless energy, a fate that ultimately befell the Warring Triad. In a breakthrough by the Imperial Mages, communion with Voidsent was achieved, ultimately culminating in the signing of an pact. I need to lift it up because it's just text tiny. Ultimately culminating in the signing of a pact between Emperor Xande and the self-proclaimed ruler of the Void, the Cloud of Darkness, in exchange for an unlimited supply of vessels which would house the minions of the Void. Allowing them to remain in the corporeal realm. The Emperor merely demanded that the Voidsent fight for him on the shores of Meracidia. With each slain, a new vessel would become available, allowing for the immediate summoning of a host and subsequent possession of the body. The more the undead army killed, the larger their ranks swelled, until not even the mighty Bahamut reborn would overcome their numbers. The great worm grew gradually weaker as the crystals required to maintain his strength became scarce due to the over-harvesting. Unable to wield his former might, Bahamut was finally captured and fixed with a Neuralink, effectively making him a tool of the Empire and putting an end to the Meracidian campaign. The Allagan Empire had claimed yet another prize. The Cloud of Darkness. One of the undisputed rulers of the Void and an entity of immeasurable strength, the Cloud of Darkness occupies the highest rung of the hierarchy of 12. This terrifying Voidsent entered into the Dark Covenant with the Emperor Xande in a bid to invade the physical realm, therefore to unmatching pieces. Where does that even play? Anybody want to find out where the song Unmatching Please is placed? I don't remember that. Hey, good to see you. Glad to have you. Must take that from the top. Also, I'm going to maybe start saying things like, footnote, the Cloud of Darkness, one of the undisputed rulers of the Void, and an entity of immeasurable strength. The Cloud of Darkness occupies the highest rung of the hierarchy of 12. This terrifying void scent entered into a dark covenant with Emperor Xande in a bid to invade the physical realm. Via hitherto sealed void gates, the covenant applies to not only the Emperor himself, but all of his bloodline, ensuring that as long as an heir remains, control over the Void Sent Queen is absolute. That was a sick piano riff, agreed. Song's name was Unmatching Pieces. Brenda Ray has a high hairline. She's not bald. A thought. Do dragons go to Atheros' live stream? Yes. If so, does that mean that someone could be walking around with the Ratatoskr Bahadur? Unlikely. What I would assume with the case of Ratatoskr Bahamut or Nidhogg is that their souls would break down live stream and the Aether would return to the star. It's not impossible in theory, but just the nature. But we do know that dragon souls come from the star and go to it. The only thing with the first brood that is another possibility is that their Aether immediately, because of Dinta being different and weird, immediately returns to the life stream as a whole rather than specifically the ethereal sea, just like maybe immediately break up. I don't think it's likely. I think what is most likely is that the soul goes to the ethereal sea and it is immediately goes to rest, which means that it breaks down and its Aether is used to create new souls and spread out into the life stream. That would be the most likely inference. But it's not entirely impossible. If not a statue, the wall or floor glyphs like what we see, whichever duty we go to prove ourselves to raise Stalgar. Inquisitor Thomas, either reborn as one of the mortal races or reborn as another dragon. It's possible. Again, I would suspect, given the nature of the dragons and the nature of what the first brood know and do, that it is most likely that their souls allow themselves to go to rest. And are not resurrected, if only in part because if that was the case, Tiamat would have been highly aware of that and the potentiality for that soul to be brought into new life. But she makes no mention of it, and also kind of the same when it comes to Ejdaya or Ratatoskr or. I'm working on the Final Fantasy XII Beastry. It seems that Jem'Hazai is the only Aesper that's not influenced by previous Final Fantasy villains or the Lucavi. I'm not the Lucavi. I'm worse with because tactics isn't my strongest suit, so I can't speak too much to that one. Will, let me double check something. Let me check the Scions of Light real quick. Of Light. True. No, because the Scions of Light. Okay. That sounds right. But yeah, I'm not. Tactics isn't my stronger suit, so I can't give you any clarification on that one. Sorry. 12 I can tell you a lot about, but tactics, I'm going to study it deeply when the remaster comes out for sure, because questions like that have definitely come up before. Bahamut should be only exception because his soul was consumed. No. So remember, primals don't actually consume the soul. Like, primals effectively are created from ether. Primals don't have souls. That is the understanding people have. And they do have some kind of will that exists. But, like, his soul would have been used. Unless there's a primary thing that someone says that the perception is that, but yeah. Yeah, the remake is, I'm going to play the remake Hardcore Inquisitor, is the plan. And an ethereal sea whale fall. You're in for a wild time. To be clear, Will, I've beaten Tactics twice. I've beaten the original version of PS1, and I've beaten War of the Lions. It just didn't grip me either time, so I don't know it as intimately. Like, I don't have it stored in my memory as intimately. I'm hoping that the remaster grips me a lot more. Definitely willing to give it that chance. How are we doing on time? Okay, I'm gonna check. I need to check my messages real quick to see if you messaged me. You did. Okay, I'm gonna be getting food probably sometime in the next hour, and I'll probably call it there. I think our focus will be on getting up to the Age of Enlightenment in the short term. Aether's soul wasn't consumed for the summoning. I thought that's the whole reason the original was truly gone. Well, the original is truly gone because... So, Dallas, when he died, his soul goes to the Ethereal Sea. Then, Tiamat wants to summon him back. So she summons him back. Dallas, I'm gonna say let's put a pin in it. Let's me and you talk about this after, because I want to make sure I'm right. And I want to double check all her dialogue with you. And if you want to help me look through it too, so that we can find clarification on that. Because I want to make sure that I'm not, maybe you're on something. But I definitely think, let's look back through. Look, it's worth looking back through Tiamat's dialogue right now, especially with 8.0 coming up. Friendly reminder, if you plan to go to FanFest, definitely tune in for the next live letter. There's like a 90% chance that that's where they're going to announce it. Also, come join our community over at Eorzean Archives, discord.gg/Eorzean Archives. We do a whole thing where we get together and have a huge, fun little party and try to get tickets together. And if you don't even plan to go, yeah. With the new Monster Hunter crossover, which of the monster fits in the classification of Tural Vidral? Within the confines of the specific classification of Tural Vidral, Arkveld doesn't... Okay, it kind of depends. It kind of depends, Zero, because it kind of depends if you mean in function as the existence of a beast or in function by dint of how it's created. In terms of how it's created, none of them. In terms of its function as a beast, Arkveld is very Tural adjacent, Vidral adjacent, very Vidral adjacent. And we'll probably be hunting it down in Shaloni. Interestingly enough, though, its environments... for those who don't know, the Final Fantasy XIV Monster Hunter Wilds crossover got announced. They're having Omega and Monster Hunter Wilds, which is a fucking phenomenal choice and going to be hilarious and a good time. And then we're getting Arkveld in 14. What's interesting is that we seem to chase down Arkveld to a place that is not currently existent in the game. It's more like an... Honestly, actually, likening Arkveld to an Allagan Chimera... is not wholly wrong, although really Zoshia would be the stronger analogy there. Yeah, Omega is going to be a right. Them choosing Omega was one of those things where, so I've been calling, I mean, plenty of people have been calling this, like, I was utterly unsurprised by this announcement because I was waiting. The only question to me was it going to be in late point 3, point 4, or in point 5? Like, was it going to be that? That was the only question. So when we got an announcement, awesome, we're getting it earlier than I expected. With the only real surprise in the announcement, frankly, because I assumed we were going to get Arkveld, is the Omega. But the second I thought about it for a second, the fact that they're getting Omega makes so much sense. Reasons that would take me too long to go into. So right now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to continue on. But yeah, Omega will be a great, great time. Also, I will be playing Wilds. Maybe I'll even stream it on the channel for doing the crossover. If anybody wants to join for fighting Omega, feel free to do so. Okay. The Fourth Umbral Era, the calamity of Earth. Meracidia had fallen, and the Empire was now the largest it had been in its entire history. The Emperor, however, was unable to savor his victory over long. War had quenched his lust for blood, and with its end came a sense of emptiness. Experiencing death had shown Xande the very limits of life, and he would no longer be satisfied with the mundanity of reigning in a time of peace. I'm gonna change the music quick.
You know what I want today? I'm doing this for the since we're gonna be listen to this. How many of you know the song "The Warrens"? It is the music for Snowcloak. It is one of my favorite songs in the game. One of the things that people don't realize about it is that actually, as a song, it goes on for 7 minutes. And it does not actually repeat. It continues and progresses. But because every time you go into battle, it resets it, most people don't know that. If you get about 4 minutes in, I think, 3-4 minutes in, there is a surprise addition to the music. So I will let that play in the background. That's fine, that's fine. An obsession with slaughter and destruction tightened its grip on Xanday's mind and slowly drove him to madness. His following orders would only serve to prove this. The Emperor bid the encapsulation of the neurolinked Bahamut in a massive iron sphere. The sphere would be launched into the heavens and set into motion around the moon, where it would use the worm's affinity to fire-aspected aether to gather energy from the sun in a form more concentrated than the weak rays which make their way to Hydaelyn's surface. With that energy, Xanday would open a gate to the void, the likes the world had never seen, and from beyond would he summon the very cloud of darkness herself, so that she might rain her destruction upon the corporeal realm, eventually driving the world to the edge of death that the Emperor longed to experience again. Unsurprisingly, very few Allagans shared the same twisted aspirations as Xanday, and seeds of unrest quickly took root. Independent resistance cells joined together to form an army which drove the Mad Emperor and his few remaining loyalists out of the Imperial Palace and into the Crystal Tower. Unfortunately, this maneuver was too little, too late. The satellite containing Bahamut was activated remotely by Xanday, commencing the transference of ethereal energy. The Void Gate would open soon. It never did. For Xanday and his technologists had made a grave miscalculation. While the tower had been fortified to endure the increased energy flow, the land upon which it was built could not withstand the sheer force being applied to it. In a matter of moments, the ground began to crack until it finally crumbled away, swallowing the Crystal Tower and Xanday with it. The Resistance victory, however, was short-lived. The Crystal Tower's collapse triggered a chain reaction of tremors, which shook the entire realm, toppling mountains and literally tearing the land asunder. In mere moments, the Allagan Empire was laid to waste. Yet even as the Crystal Tower was sinking, Emperor Xanday's most trusted aide, the technologist Amon, invoked powerful magics and halted the flow of time within the structure. The tower and its denizens fell to a deep slumber. Many of the Allagans' most dangerous experiments, including the creation of chimerical bioweaponry and the core components used in Bahamut's satellite, were conducted under a veil of secrecy at the maximum security floating research complex known as Azisla. Shaloni is so underutilized in Dawn Trail. I want to love it, but mostly a filler arc to give you a switch from Dawn Arc to Alexandria. Yeah, you're not wrong. As someone, Inquisitor, honestly, I think that is a fair critique to levy towards it. I do wish more would be done with it. More had been done with it. Particularly for the fact that, like, as someone from the Midwest and who currently lives in the East, the feeling that, like, there is Lozani Heta, but, like, the fact that Shaloni gets somewhat underused. For those who don't know, that the part that I was talking about just kicked in. There's a choral section for the Warrens. The fact that Alexandria is effectively English. Like, we don't get a lot of American. We only really get Shaloni. And one sense, that's fine. The other sense, I love the South American stuff. I love it. And I wish there was just a little bit more of inspiration from the cultures I grew up in. Even just being able to go to the Great Lakes in some way would be nice. I mean, it's not literally the Great Lakes, but there is a Great Lake. So. But yeah, The Warrens is a glorious, beautiful piece of music. I just noticed my archive of Monster Hunter World is gone from my PC. 1 moment. Huh, weird. Ding ding. Yeah. Sounds weird. The question, do Xande and Amon rip off Vana by building a prison moon, or did Vana rip off Xande and Amon when she learned about the future from us? Seeing as we don't know that we told her about the particulars of Dalamud, look, it'd be reasonable to assume we did. I'm not saying we didn't. But I would assume, well, because also the Allagans don't know. As far as we know, the Heimdall probe studies the moon, but we're not aware to the degree to which the Allagans were in any way knowledgeable about Zodiark being trapped on the moon. In part because you would assume if they did, they would have gone for him. And partly because Emmett Selk and the Ascians manipulating them would have wanted them to not know about it. Because they don't want to free Zodiark until Zodiark was complete. So, yeah. I actually love how detached it is. Just a little adventure with only us in Aaronville. It was like a breath of fresh air. It definitely is a breath of fresh air, Infinite. I think the thing is, on being a breath of fresh air to reset the energy, it succeeds wildly. I think I'm with Inquisitor where the sad side of that is I wish there was more done there at later points. I do love 7.1. I do love what we get with the oh my god. Followers of the Broadneck. The Mikote that are, why am I forgetting their name? Hetzaro. The Hetzaro, I think that's a great use of Shaloni. I just wish there was more American stuff, is all. Although I will say, anytime there was American stuff, a lot of Americans complained in a way that I found funny because it felt familiar. Whereas, like, a lot of people haven't traveled, so things suit. Like, there are lots of parts of the game that are like, well, that's just fucking, you know, Western Europe right there. But because it was unfamiliar, it didn't bother. I don't think it caught people as much. I think even that you can see this in Smile, where like Smile is using a lot of very familiar musical stylings to a lot of North American people. And so in some ways, when people say it feels Disney or it feels like Broadway, they're right. But that's intentional, and the same thing that's been done with every other expansion, only with the other ones, it didn't feel familiar in that same way, so frustrating. Not that that's people's only criticism, but it's definitely worth keeping in mind. Oh, I love Everywhere and Nowhere. We're gonna play this for a little bit. And the reason I'm playing this, obviously, is because Allag captured Omega, and this is used in the Omega quests. I'm gonna finish chatting, and then I'm gonna catch up. Or was it his restraints? And I wasn't the one who designed Zodiark's prison. It was Presunder. Yeah, yes. You are correct in that the concept was created by the Presunder, Minfina, Dallas. But, yeah, the doing of it. When we first entered Jacques Dral, I immediately asked where and when ranch. Yeah. I found it fine. Accents make Wonder Building entertaining. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna keep going until my V is gonna be getting food in a bit, and when she gets back, that is when I'm gonna stop. Princess Selena's legacy. With the Crystal Tower buried, a civilization had almost completely With the Crystal Tower buried, a civilization which had almost completely relied on the tower's energy to function was plunged into utter chaos. Machines ground to a halt, lamps fell dark, lines of communication and transportation were severed. Those who served on artificially levitated employment sectors such as Azizla were suddenly trapped. The flow of supplies upon which they relied for the maintenance of their facilities dried up. without the energy and manpower to keep them in check. The chimerical aberrations contained in these quarantined areas escaped their cages and soon turned on their creators. Realizing that control would not easily be regained, the floating islands were quickly abandoned by the remaining Allagans. They would remain uninhabited by all but the chimeras for 5 millennia, until their rediscovery at the dawn of the 7th Astral Era. Though the worldwide calamity had claimed the lives of the majority of the Empire's population, including those of the royal bloodline, there was one descendant from Xande I who survived the quakes, the young Princess Selena. Sharp-witted for her age, the princess was quick to realize the true implications of the fall of Syracuse Tower, and the fact that it had not truly been destroyed, only buried. While the spire served to trap the horrors within, it also served to preserve them. Lacking the means to destroy the tower, she instead chose to utilize the power that had been granted her via her ancestors' most unholy pact. For as long as the blood of the Xande line remained intact, there would ever be a force which could keep the Cloud of Darkness under control. Utilizing the remnants of Allagan biotechnology, Princess Selena transferred her bloodline and the power it held to a trusted ally, with the hopes that it would endure until it was again required. Proof of this power became known as the Allagan Eye, and can still be seen today in many of those with ancestral ties to the Mikote Seeker of the Sun G-Tribe. I'm gonna change song. Way too short. Speaking of Mikote, Great Serpent of Tural. I mean, you want to fight a Great Serpent of Tural, just go fight the world boss in Shaloni. I mean, that plus Tender Valley, obviously. I would have thought Boblins would sound like goblins with a tinge of South American accent. I mean, goblins and moblins aren't voiced, so we don't know. ¿Qué pasa? Footnote. Ironically, it was another calamitous event that saw the re-emergence of the Crystal Tower from its 5,000-year slumber. As for the horrors that lurked within, it was as Princess Selena had feared. Xande, Amon, and the Cloud of Darkness had not perished in their time buried beneath Hydaelyn. Fortunately, nor had the Imperial bloodline, and through the efforts of the G-Tribe and a brave band of heroes, the threat of domination at the hands of evil was once again. Une and Doga. Seeking to raise Xande from the dead, the technologist Amon looked to the first emperor's descendants. His subjects were Une and Doga, 2 members of the royal bloodline. Using techniques preferred in his dark Using techniques perfected in his dark I'm just gonna say laboratories. Using techniques perfected in his dark laboratoriums, Amon created dozens of copies of each. He called them clones, echoes of the original made flesh, yet lacking a soul. Thus these experiments were put to use as weapons, when Amon could glean no more from them. Though Une and Doga both supported the Emperor's second ascension, they learned of his descent into madness with horror. They gave onto 2 clones their spirits, a measure for if they themselves failed to thwart the Emperor. The clones are said to have been imbued with an unbending purpose, to end Xande's unholy covenant. Before the original Une and Doga could prevail, the Crystal Tower entered its eon-long slumber. When it awoke after the calamity, so did the 2 clones within. Fortuitously, they then came upon a group of scholars, calling themselves Noah. After many trials and tribulations, it was this fellowship that saw an end to the first emperor and the fruit of his terrible ambition. 14 has a wonderful variety of piano pieces. I need to learn piano. Yeah, I know a little bit of piano. I'm not good at instruments, but yeah. I've learned a bunch of different Square Enix songs on piano specifically. I should do a lot of 14 words of 14 stuff too. I just need to get a keyboard these days, full size, and relearn piano again. Yeah, y'all should. Huge recommend. And now for incredibly important lore that I knew about and was excited about, and also relevant to Alla Island and then Dawn Trail. God, I love it when this game. I love it when this game has established long-standing lore that gets used in major plot points. And it must be such a headache because, like, for them to do that, they also have to, like, what happens if you haven't done Allo? 7.0 still works, but knowing it sure does enhance it. The Forgotten Age. There exists no records of the years immediately following the fall of the mighty Allagan Empire. This dark period is loosely referred to as the Forgotten Age, where very little is known of how its people live. The Fourth Astral Era, the Fall of Civilization. From what information, mostly based in oral traditions, remain of the early Fourth Astral Era, blame for the fall of civilization was placed firmly on man's lust for knowledge. Water. The people deemed that the answer to life's mysteries were best left with the gods. Pursuit of that which lies beyond man's ken was seen as a sin, and that it was this covetous. Tiny text. And that it was this covetousness that proved the impetus for his destruction. A widespread shunning of any and all manner of higher learning began. Books were burned, and parents refrained from teaching letters to their children. Surviving Allagan technologies were destroyed, buildings were toppled or buried, and the learned, few remained, and the learned, few remained, were exiled or even killed. Civilization took a giant leap backward to a time not unlike the Second Astral Era. The pendulum had swung, and an era long thirst for knowledge was quickly replaced with an unmoving fear of the heavens. Stories of the Allagan Empire survived, now only in scripture, where the fallen civilization was reduced to a simple device used to teach lessons on the sin of hubris. For approximately 1,500 years, a number long speculated, but only recently confirmed with the discovery of an operating expulsion node in Azisla, placing the abandonment of the floating research complex at 5,000 years. The silent war against knowledge continued. The church manipulating what knowledge, if any, trickled its way down to the masses. Religious leaders went even as far as introducing a new alphabet for their holy scriptures, taught only to men and women of the cloth, so as to solidify their control over the realm through the continued illiteracy of the common people. It is therefore ironic that this alphabet for the privileged would eventually evolve into the Eorzean script used throughout the realm. The Fifth Umbral Era, the Calamity of Ice. As is the case with the near entirety of the Fourth Astral Era, the great calamity which would end the period is also shrouded in mystery. Tribal legend and local folklore does, however, speak of a seemingly endless winter that brought with its bitter cold, raging snowstorms and great rivers of ice. Without the ability to grow crops, much of the population perished, or was forced to flee to the south and its more temperate climes. It is believed that for the years that encompassed the Fifth Umbral Era, or as it is also known, the Age of Endless Frost, much of the blood-brine sea was frozen solid. On one hand, preventing fishing and decimating the populations of sea life, but on the other, allowing for the migration of Mikote tribes from southern Ilsevard into northern Eorzea. Tribes made up of descendants of the very same Mikote were persecuted. Tribes made up of the descendants of the very same Mikote who were persecuted against and driven from Eorzea by the Allagan Empire almost 2 millennia earlier. The newly hardened seas of this frigid area provided the tribes with a means around the massive peaks of Girabanya that prevented their return in the Fourth Astral Era. And while there was little awaiting them in the rime-encrusted realm when they arrived, their uncanny ability in the hunt granted them a means of survival until the frost had melted. Footnote. It was not long after their return to the realm that the Mikote learned of the new Eorzean alphabet. Tribal seers were quick to claim that the number of letters in the alphabet, 26, directly corresponded with the exact number of Seekers of the Sun tribes that had made the journey across the frozen sea was most fortuitous, subsequently convincing the tribes that they should each take one of those letters into its name. Footnote. It is not uncommon even today for massive floating islands of ice to appear in the winter moons along Eorzea's northernmost coast. The far reach in the Fifth Umbral Era, however, these frozen mountains were said to have appeared as far off. In the Fifth Umbral Era, however, these frozen mountains were said to have appeared as far south as the Jade Sea. Damn. Cross buns. Pop out chat real quick just to make sure. Nope, none of y'all said anything. Okie dokie doke. Gotta change the music quick. Something Maki-ish. Let's do... You know what song I really love? Primogenitor. I love the song Primogenitor much. Okay, since we're about to talk about Nock, the Age of Enlightenment. The Fifth Astral Era was an age of untold wonders, when the arcane arts burgeoned and the great civilizations that commanded such powers flourished. Alas, this age of enlightenment would not last. The War of the Magi brought the great floods of the Sixth Umbral Calamity, which swallowed once proud nations and left naught but a battered wasteland in its wake. Neneko Neko, Uldan Scholar. The Fifth Astral Era, Seeds of Magic. At the dawn of the Fifth Astral Era, as Eorzea was huddled in the bitter... At the dawn of the Fifth Astral Era, as Eorzea was huddling in the bitter cold of the endless frost, the people of the realm once more beseeched the 12 for warmth. It was during this time that a magnificent cathedral was built on the edge of the Black Shroud, a sanctuary where people would fervently pray to the gods and harness the power of their blessings through the use of magic. These rituals rose in prominence as a way for the survivors of the Fifth Calamity to cope with the era's bleak prospects, and served as a driving force in the realm's revitalization. As the harsh climb subsided, the people once again set out across the realm. Small settlements grew into towns, then cities, each with their own unique culture. The universal worship of the 12 splintered as the denizens of these communities sought to assert their newfound sense of identity by choosing patron deities to protect them. These widening differences in culture, religion, and approaches to the arcane arts would lead to an intense contest for supremacy between nations. Footnote: the first sanctum of the 12 is believed to have been erected around the dawn of the Fifth Astral Era. After years of disuse, the original structure fell into ruin, overgrown by thick brush of the Black Shroud, and lying forgotten until the Seventh Umbral Calamity, when it was unearthed and restored to its former glory. In the modern age, it also serves as a hall wherein the gods bear witness to the declaration of eternal bonds between lovers. A precursor to war. Fledgling cities emerged around the 300th year of the Fifth Astral Era, and for the next 2.5 centuries, the number of city-states would grow to 12, each paying tribute to a unique god or goddess of the Eorzean pantheon. These city-states, however, lacked the stability of the modern-day counterparts, and the onset of the Age of Enlightenment was rife with turmoil, with territorial borders endlessly redrawn as smaller domains found themselves ravaged, divided, or integrated into larger populations. By the 1000th year of the Fifth Astral Era, the realm's sovereign nations numbered 6, the most prominent amongst them, Mach, located in the western basin of Yafane, Amdapor, situated on the plains of central Aldonard, or what is now the South Shroud, and Nim, spanning the western coast of the Isle of Vilbur. In the latter half of the era, the city-states which had heretofore weathered centuries of intermittent upheaval would find themselves embroiled in a feud of an entirely different scale. Footnote: concerning the rise and fall of the early civilizations of the Fifth Astral Era, historians believe there is still much to be gleaned from yet undiscovered relics that remain hidden within the shattered ruins of the fallen cities. The rush to salvage these priceless artifacts, however, has pit Eorzean scholars in pursuit of knowledge against the avarice of ruthless treasure hunters. The Dark City of Mach. The lands of Yafame are presently mired in the uninhabitable saltwater swamp. Yet this was not always the case. When the icy winds of the Fifth Umbral Calamity abated, thawed snows trickled down from the northeastern mountains of Abalathia to form the White Maidens, which in time nurtured the soils of the lowland. The region transformed into a fertile landscape, and it was near the 500th year of the Fifth Astral Era that the region's people came together to establish the city of Mach. At the time of its foundation, Mach was merely one amongst 12 undistinguished city-states struggling to survive. The Amdapori were the dominant power, controlling a sizable portion of central Eorzea, and wielding significant influence outside their immediate domain. The balance shifted drastically in Mach's favor around the year 800. However, when a sorceress by the name of when a sorceress by the name of Shitoto came upon a ruinous form of magic. So let me take that from the top. Wielding significant The balance shifted drastically in Mok's favor around the year 800, however, when a sorceress by the name of Shitoto came upon a ruinous form of magic. A tale passed down by the practitioners of the arts in the Order of Naldal claim it was Shitoto who first developed the ability to draw upon ambient aether to imbue her spells with deadly power. Thus did the realm witness the birth of modern black magic. The Magi used this newfound knowledge to bolster the strength of their army, and were successfully able to weather the tumultuous ebb and flow of feuds that reduced many of the other city-states to rubble, ultimately rising to become a substantial military power. Footnote: the crumbling foundation of the city of Mok can still be seen in Yafam's brackish swamps. The enormous scale of the ruins evidence to the civilization's once vast population. Rising waters, however, have since reclaimed the former home of the mages, reducing it to an uninhabitable wilderness. Void magics. Although the Magi were known masters of black magic, the extent of their power was not limited to Shitoto's school of spellcraft. Towards the autumn years of the 5th Astral Era, the civilization had begun perfecting void magics, the summoning and manipulation of creatures known as void sent from beyond the corporeal realm. A report by the scholars of nominated observers of Artifact Historical defines the void as an other world parallel to the one in which man dwells. Abnormal events can weaken the veil between worlds, tearing it asunder, and allowing the void sent to invade the material realm. These fiends have a depraved appetite and seek our world merely to consume the aether it contains, allowing neither beast nor man to stand in their way. The mages of the Allagan Empire had previously experimented in forging covenants with the demons of the void in hopes of harnessing the creature's power. The Magi expanded on this endeavor, adding extra protections to their experiments, so as not to invite the same fate that befell the Allagan. To this end, the mages developed an occult device, the Nullstone, to preserve themselves and their city should a pact be broken. If a summoned voidsent refused to obey the master, a void mage could smite the feral being using the Nullstone to sever its ties to the corporeal realm. It was in mastering this power that the Magi came to believe in their civilization's supremacy over all others, eventually driving them to war. Footnote: powerful voidsent were brought to heel via the Nullstone, reducing them to not more than strategic weapons for the Magi military. A mage by the name of Califisteri combined the power of aether-infused crystals with the ritual consumption of voidsent blood to achieve a twisted form of immortality, that she might guard the artifact from those who would seek to destroy it. Footnote: creatures categorized in the upper rungs of the 12-tiered voidsent hierarchy cannot pass through the dimensional borders by way of an artificial tear. They instead require a willing vessel from the corporeal side, possessing their soul and entering the world by way of a summoning. The Nullstone had the capability to destroy that vessel and nullify the pact between it and the summoner, making it a powerful tool in maintaining control over even the most powerful of voidsent. Let's change the music. Something and Can I confirm my archived Monster Hunter world footage is gone? Oh, that's a bummer. But I made it to the back to the glorious city of Buck. Supremacy and war in a nice way. Where would that put the 4 fiends on the Voids and Powerful scale? I think you would put them if you use. So remember, it is worth pointing out that even in EE1, the Voidsent hierarchy is not an actual thing. It is a thing that the people of Eorzea created to kind of make sense of the relative scale of power between Voidsent. So that's just worth keeping in mind for the fact that it's not an absolute scale and it's also extremely arbitrary. With that said, I would put the fiends probably in the rung right below Cloud of Darkness. Cloud of Darkness like is the highest rung of, yeah, Archie of 12. Give me a second. Let me see if I can find the. Oh, there's a diagram. Okay, yeah, that's not really a diagram per se. But I would look to like Diablos, right? Look at him. They're clearly on his level, if not stronger, thanks to the power given to them from Golbez. Amdapor, like Amdapor. Boom, got him. Look, why argue over Mach or Amdapor supremacy when you could instead just say, like, what about Nim, who's fucking rad? And also remember that Nim had a bunch of scholars who created a giant net wall to hold back a tsunami tide in order to allow their people to escape. And I don't know what is more rad, powerful than that. Speaking of, the ancient city of Amdapor. At the dawn of the 5th Astral Era, a group of Hyur arrived in what is now the South Shroud. The area in which they settled was an open plain, interspersed with massive outcrops of light-colored rock, distinctly bereft of the thick forest cover now associated with the region. The abundance of stone allowed the Hyur to erect exceptionally sturdy structures, and by the year 300, Central Aldenard had been transformed into a bustling city. Central Aldenard had been transformed into the bustling city of Amdapor. The people of Amdapor attempted to commune with the enigmatic elementals of the Black Shroud, that they might partake in the bounty of the forest. The elementals, ever untrusting of men, declined any interaction with their new neighbors, content with the distance between them. The Amdapori respected this wish and did not forcibly encroach upon the sacred Holt, save for the occasional pursuit of quarry during a hunt. It is worth mentioning, however, that the elementals did not entirely shun outsiders during this period. Amicable relations were maintained with the Ixali tribes, the elementals allowing them to ingress into the Shroud, upon deeming the beastmen no threat to the forest's natural balance. As their city-state prospered, the Amdapori focused on fortifying their domain, expanding their defenses by constructing an enormous stronghold atop a knoll outside of the city proper. Paying reverence to Nafka, the goddess of abundance, they claimed to cherish harmony with nature, and promised their neighbors a peaceful coexistence. The societies in the surrounding vicinity benefited from this philosophy, and Amdapor was viewed not as a threat, but a respected elder, watching over its 11 fellow cities. Thus did it come to be known as the Ancient City. Footnote. Much of what remains of the city of Amdapor is slowly being swallowed by an ever-thickening blanket of mold. Much of what remains of the city of Amdapor is slowly being swallowed by an ever-thickening blanket of mold and rot, caused by an elemental imbalance lingering in the aftermath of the 7th Umbral calamity. Even so, archaeologists expect the decay will do little to destroy the ancient city's stone foundation. Architectural feats which have already withstood more than a millennium and a half of nature's wrath. The discovery of white magic. The Amdapori initially harnessed basic magics for us in The Amdapori initially harnessed basic magics for use in their city's defense, drawing and expanding upon the primitive knowledge of golem creation to temporarily imbue stone statues with life. However, in the 9th century, mages of the ancient city bore witness to the Magi use of the destructive arts to subjugate neighboring city-states. Wary of their neighbors' ambitions, the Amdapori sought to counter these black magics by improving upon their own spellcraft, weaving with the intent to purify, ward, and heal, the art of white magic. Wary of their neighbors' ambitions, Amdapori sought to counter these black magics by improving upon their own spellcraft, weaving with the intent to purify, ward, and heal, and thus the art of white magic was created. It has been argued that without the discovery of white magic, Amdapor would likely have succumbed to Maki's ambitions. Amdapor would have likely succumbed to Mok's ambitions. That the ancient city had developed a means to keep the black mages in check prevented the Magi army from waging a full-fledged assault on Amdapor, lest they too suffer grievous loss. Thus, for the next few centuries, did Eorzea experience a fragile, yet lasting peace, fostered by the precarious balance between the two nations and their opposing schools of magic. Footnote: despite their sinister visage, demon walls are not void-sent, but forgekin created using a primal form of Amdapori white magic. By inscribing a stone wall with an arcane pattern of blood, these golems would spring to life, to intimidate and to repel trespassers. Footnote: carved during the 5th Astral Era, this winged lion, an ensorcelled stone guardian capable of manipulating white magic at its own will, is a testament to the advancement of Amdapori arcane capabilities.
Amdapor isn't good enough to compete with Mok, Skull. Nah, maybe one of them cities we don't know. Amdapor, like Karnak. Maybe Karnak kicked their ass. Okay, I'm gonna change the music. This is one of my favorite songs, actually, from the 5th Astral Era. Berry's Tears. Oh, I love the garden music in Occult Crescent, how it uses all the different musical motifs.
A war on the horizon. The people of Eorzea flourished in the peace brought about by the impasse between black and white schools of sorcery. Following in the footsteps of Mok and Amdapor, other city-states began developing their own forms of spellcraft in an attempt to further their societies. This approach to the achievement of prosperity was vastly different than that taken by the Allagans of the 3rd Astral Era, eschewing technological growth for advancement of a more arcane nature, However, progress would come with a hefty price, as man would soon become drunk on the might that arcane... I didn't remember how to say this before. What is it? Puissance? Cursed you, EE1, and using that arcane, esoteric words that I love so much.
Puissance.
Puissance. That's definitely French as hell.
The people of Eorzea flourished in the peace brought about by the impasse between the black and white schools of sorcery. Following in the footsteps of Mok and Amdapor, other city-states began developing their own forms of spellcraft in an attempt to further their societies. This approach to the achievement of prosperity was vastly different from that taken by the Allagans of the 3rd Astral Era, eschewing technological growth for the advancement of a more arcane nature. However, progress would come with a hefty price, as man would soon become drunk on the might that arcane puissance would bring. Societies built upon foundations of magic were forced to sacrifice their natural surroundings, as vast amounts of aether were drawn from the land, in order to maintain the city's magic. The realm's enlightenment had become a double-edged sword. Each mage city maintained the facade of an edifying heritage, while secretly honing their offensive magics. One need not be an oracle to see that this interlude of peace would soon draw to an end. The mages of Mach silently turned their eyes to the dark, seeking to slake their expansionist ambitions by amassing an army of once enthralled. Amdapor kept their outward appearance as a rich bastion of arts and culture, but daunting sculptures of its guardians soon appeared in every corner of the city, while the actual catalyst for war remains lost to time. It was Ascians. It is known that the frequency of political and military posturing between the two nations increased in dramatic fashion. As the realm approached the mid-13th century, and ere long, the entirety of Eorzea became entangled in an inescapable web of strife. The War of the Magi had begun. Karnak had mummies, so they're instantly opposite. Guardian is hell. Oh, yeah, that's definitely one way to put it. Footnote. The Wanderer's Palace was a massive stone temple dedicated to the Nemean's patron god, Oshan, ruler of the mountains and protector of vagrants. It appears to be coincidence that Vilbrin's indigenous kobold tribes also worship the mountain. Revering Mount Ogomoro as their sacred mother. But this commonality is believed to be why the Nemeans were able to foster amicable relationship with the Beastmen. The floating city of Nim. Near the 500th year of the 5th Astral Era, scores of Lalafelian sailors arrived on Vilbrin's shore in longboats woven of reeds. Here, the mercantilists built a meager settlement on the southern part of the isle, with hopes of establishing trade with the native kobold tribes. In time, their lonely outpost would grow into the maritime city of Nim. Nim's population was not as robust as the other 12 city-states, but what Nimians lacked in ascendancy, they made up for in commerce, making full use of their consummate skills in seafaring. Nimian sailors were a rough and rowdy lot, traits they used to their advantage in establishing the Royal Marines. A small yet fearsome naval force that was placed in charge of the city's defenses. Translations of Nimian records depict the Marines as axe-wielding marauders who would fight alongside a handful of talented mages, who provided healing and support by way of their own uniquely developed brand of spellcraft. Despite their humble ranks, the Marines' tact proved their greatest strength, a great portion of Nim's legacy alluding to legends of their fierce martial prowess. Even during the Great War, the Royal Marines ensured that their small nation maintained its independence by valiantly repelling wave after wave of void sent by the Magi across the Rothlid Sound. The Nimian Plague. The War of the Magi raged for nigh on 3 centuries before Nim was stricken by a mysterious plague, severely crippling the city-state. One common theory used to explain how the scourge was spread involves a curious story concerning a band of Nimian sailors who had been cast adrift in the South Seas after their ship was battered by a fearsome storm. The disoriented seamen landed on a desert isle where they met a native tribe of Lalafels who nursed them back to health and mended their broken vessel so that they might return safely to Nim. Before the traders disembarked, the islanders bestowed upon them a parting gift, an ornate amphora. Not long after the sailors returned to the floating city, presented the token of friendship, Nim's people fell one by one to an incurable sickness, heretofore unseen on Vilbrin. It was not until it was too late that Nimian scholars discovered the amphora to be part of an elaborate Magi plan that would see the unleashing of Bitoso, a pestilence-carrying voidsent summoned to Eorzea for the sole purpose of decimating the Nimian population. Those who contracted the voidsent disease experienced disfiguring symptoms. Their nose and ears melted away, their limbs shriveled, and their flesh turned a ghastly shade of green. Attempts to contain the plague included isolation of the infected, who were locked away within the Wanderer's Palace, the sacred Nimian temple of Osha. The Nimians remained wholly unaware of Bitoso's cloaked presence, and even as the temple's halls became filled with the sick and dying, the plague continued to spread. Panic over the green death eventually drove the city-state's mages to their wits' end, leaving them with no choice but to take drastic measures. In a last fit of desperation, the mages used their magics to swell the land's waters, sealing the Wanderer's Palace, as well as the fates of those trapped inside. Hysteria surrounding the plague would eventually consume the Nimians, leading their nation down the path of self-destruction. The Magi, meanwhile, were ready to reap the seeds of destruction they had sown. Footnote. Many of those afflicted with the Nimian plague were roused from a deep slumber when the protective barrier that for centuries had isolated the Wanderer's Palace from the outside world was shattered by the fallen shards of Dalamud. With no knowledge of the plague and its disfiguring effects on the skin and extremities, those early explorers of the recently surfaced temple claimed the ruins to be inhabited by Tonberries, mythical, rancorous creatures believed to stalk the shadows of night in search of revenge. Footnote. Bitoso's ability to conceal his form left the Nimians guessing as to the actual cause of the plague that was consuming their city from within. By the time they had uncovered the truth, it was too late. To save those who had fallen, both to the scourge itself and at the hands of the mages who had sought to quell it. Green DPS. The Battle of Amdapor. By the year 1510, the War of the Magi were nearing a climax as the Void Mages of Mach pushed ever closer to Amdapor. Despite having stood for centuries, Amdapor Keep, the ancient city's first line of defense, was quick to fall to Mach's fell army of otherworldly demons. With the gate to Amdapor laid open, the Void Mages heralded their arrival in the city proper with the summoning of Diablos, a high-ranking voidsent meant to seal Amdapor's fate. However, Mach sorely underestimated the defensive magics of Amdapor. To withstand Diablos and the minions under his unholy command, the White Mages breathed life into the city's most powerful stone guardians. Gathering their collective strength, the Amdapori were able to seal away the Void Prince, forcing the Magi to withdraw. Yet while the ancient city may have triumphed that day, it was a hollow victory, for it did little to stall the sun as it set on this once great civilization. The era's darkest hour was nigh. The Magi march on Amdapor was not the sole cause of Eorzea's downfall. 3 centuries of ceaseless assault on the land had taken its toll. 3 centuries of ceaseless assault on the land had taken its toll. The drain of energies used to propagate war, sending the realm's elemental balance askew. This final battle was merely the straw which saw the balance break. Only after the dust settled did the people of Eorzea begin to truly notice the damage they had wrought. The realm's most powerful seers were called to scry the realm's future, but what they foresaw was darkness. It was too late to amend their ways. A calamity was upon them, and soon the waters would rise to purge the land of those who had ravaged her so. Footnote. Crafted and given life by the mages of Amdapor, Karibu is one of many guardian statues erected around the cities. Karibu is one of many guardian statues erected around the city to counter the Voidsend's invasion. Using advanced techniques honed over centuries, the Amdapori were able to create a golem who had not only mastered martial artistry, but arcane spellcasting as well. Footnote. The Magi had intended Diablos to be the secret weapon in annihilating the Amdapori mages and toppling the ancient city. What they had underestimated was the desperation with which the white mages would fight to defend their home, and the home of their children. Though many gave their lives in this task, Diablos was eventually sealed deep beneath the city, and Amdapor was safe. For a time. Fuck Mock! Birth of the Grand Companies. Scholars and mages from all nations entered their government, entreated their governments to, if not temporarily, set aside their differences and focus their attention on the larger problem at hand. Monitoring of the realm's aether indicated that an unhealthy balance towards water. Monitoring of the realm's aether indicated an unhealthy imbalance towards water, suggesting the manifestation of a calamity-scale flood of epic proportions. The city-state's leaders could not long deny the evidence laid before them, and though begrudgingly at first, soon began to pool their resources, hastily creating central command centers to first and foremost address the protection of civilians from the coming deluge. These emergency forces would later become known as the Grand Companies. The Nimians, despite still reeling from the losses incurred by the plague, ordered their dwindled military force out into the rising seas to construct an expansive floating net of protective wards, dubbed Operation Maelstrom. Amdapor mobilized what remained of its military to commence the evacuation of the realm's people north to the mountains of Abalathia's spine, abandoning the city so many had recently given their lives to defend. Yeah, we're good. Last page. The Arc of the Magi. As the Grand Companies of Mach and Amdapor enacted their contingency plans to evacuate their citizenry to higher ground, the Magi were looking beyond the mountains, well beyond. Confident in their ability to control any and all monstrosities wrested from the void, the city-state began construction of an airship known as the Ark, designed to run on the dark energies of an entire legion of Voidsent sealed within its hull. The rulers of Mach envisioned that the floating sanctuary would carry entire families and their livelihoods, livestock, seeds, supplies, and more into the skies, where they would wait in relative safety until the waters of the calamity had receded. Yet even with a myriad of mindless thralls at their disposal, the Ark still required a core powerful enough to see the vessel to the heavens. Thus the Void Mages sought the power of a Voidsent, the likes of which they had never before summoned. A ruler from one of the highest tiers of the Voidsent hierarchy, Skaha, the Shadow Queen. Only a mage of strong mind control Only a mage of strong mind could endeavor to control so potent a prisoner without the use of the Nullstone, which by that time had been lost in the rising waters. The responsibility was ultimately given to Cessair Blackwing, a high void mage of questionable repute and an outspoken critic of the War of the Magi. Upon learning of the Ark and the means by which the Magi mages sought to power the vessel, Cessair voiced her vehement disapproval of the plan, claiming it reckless at best, deadly at worst. However, the rising seas that had already begun to swallow the realm left her little choice. She reluctantly agreed to helm the plan, only to save the lives of her people. Cessair and her cadre of 53 void mages boarded the Ark, successfully contained within a complex network of interconnected coffins, the energies of Skaha, and more than 50 score void sent. The vessel launched to the cheers of an entire nation, the hopes that their efforts would lead to the preservation of their society. The Ark and her passengers, however, were never to return. It's interesting to point out the difference between what they did and what the Ragnarok was. Okay, I'm going to finish up this page and then we're going to call it there. Despite the peerless talents of Cessair and her cadre, the overwhelming power of the Shadow Queen could not long be contained. The mage's grip on Skaha slowly loosened, and lesser creatures under the Queen's command escaped their fetters. Free to roam the ship, the Voidsent took full advantage of the tight quarters to make quick work of the Magi citizenry. Fearing that a complete loss of control was inevitable, the High Void Mage and her loyal compeers chose to sacrifice their lives in one final attempt to redouble the seal on Skaha and return her minions to their coffin. With no surviving Void Mages, the familiar Kate Sith was left alone aboard the masterless vessel as it wandered through the mists of the Sea of Clouds, where it has since been given a more ominous title, the Void Ark. Footnote. Advancements in airship technology achieved in the late 6th and early 7th Astral Era have given rise to increased numbers of expeditions into skies unknown. Reports from the expeditions of sightings of a massive ghost ship drifting aimlessly in the Sea of Clouds gave rise to official investigations, which in turn resulted in the rediscovery of Mach's forsaken Ark. Lost some 1,500 years past. Footnote. Deep within the Void Ark's hull are stowed seemingly endless rows of stone coffins. These sarcophagi were not, however, funerary vessels used to inter the remains of the vessel's passengers, but containment units for the Voidsent, summoned by the Ark's architects. The coffins served as an arcane foci to channel the dark energies of the creatures trapped within and divert them to the Ark's engine. Footnote. The coffin displayed here is the massive stone cyst believed to once contain Skaha, the Shadow Queen. A powerful Voidsent, Skaha was summoned along with a 1,000-strong army of lesser minions to serve as the Ark's means of propulsion. The Void Mage's efforts to control the Queen and her servants, however, were met with disastrous results. The sixth Umbral calamity, the calamity of water. As both scholar and seer scryed the realm's elemental imbalance, culminating in the far-reaching flood that eventually swept over Eorzea. And with the calamity of water, did the 5th Astral Era come to a close. Coastal towns were pummeled by tidal waves, while rivers overflowed their banks, swallowing settlements and leaving inarable soils in their wake. The great city of Mach was swallowed whole by a torrent the likes of which the realm had hitherto never experienced. The few who remained drowned as they cast their eyes and hopes heavensward, content in the belief that the Ark would see the glory of their people endure. Those who had the sense to retreat to higher ground would return to Yafane to learn that they were the inheritors to a wasteland of salt-clogged swamps, where even the hardiest of weeds refused to take root, let alone crops with which one might sustain a family. The few remaining Nimian citizens who had not been touched by the Green Death evacuated north into the mountainous regions of Outer Lenosea, as the Royal Marines commenced their ambitious Operation Maelstrom, while the Grand Company was successful in turning back the largest of swells, the mages were unable to prevent the scores of subsequent waves from pulverizing their coastal city-state. Lands reclaimed by the sea were reduced to rocky reefs. Leaving nary a home to which Nim's few survivors might return. As most of their land's energies had been exhausted in their efforts to seal Diablos, there was little remaining for Amdapor's white mages to draw upon to stay the waters which had already enveloped the territories held by Nim and Mach. The alternatives were a hurried exodus into the highlands of Garabania before the deluge reached the ancient city. The region abandoned, the elementals who had quietly borne witness to the Amdapori people's rapacious consumption of the land's aether saw to it that the city's remains be devoured in thick, sorcerous brush not long after the waters receded, thereafter preventing ingress into Amdapor. And thus did the ruins remain hidden from mortal eyes until the elementals' glamours were dispelled during the seventh calamity. It could be said that the greatest of Eorzea's magical civilizations succumbed to the chaos of their own contriving. Yet it would be misguided to conclude that the entirety of mankind was beyond redemption, for the sins of a few, amidst the strife of the calamity and subsequent Sixth Umbral era. It could be said that the greatest of Eorzea's magical civilizations succumbed to a chaos of their own contriving. Yet it would be misguided to conclude that the entirety of mankind was beyond redemption, the sins of a few. Amidst the strife of the calamity and the subsequent Sixth Umbral era, legends have long told of the advent of a band of saviors known as the 12 Archons, who helps to warn the people of the impending doom, and provide salvation to countless scores in their time. Without champions such as these, the path of the Sixth Astral Era may have been longer and more fraught with peril than it actually was. And with that, we're going to call it for today. This is a long chapter and also has a lot of long text, so we have to get through this and through also the Dreams of Ice before we get to book 3, which will be her. We'll get to book 3 probably. I'll try to get to it next session, but it is going to be. Oh my god, really? It's going to be 40 pages to get to a next session, so it might take 2 sections. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us. Hopefully this was enjoyable for you. We'll continue along, and I'll continue trying to audio editing it with current pace, and honestly, with how many pages, so how many pages did we get through today? We got through we got through about 15 pages today. So, but these are also dense ones, so it'll be a little bit easier as we go along. But yeah, I'm hopeful. Basically, my goal is to, before 8.0 comes out, be done with Encyclopedia Eorzea Volume 3. So we'll make our way through. Hopefully this has been entertaining for you guys. Hopefully you enjoy the future days. It will probably broadly be either Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Probably Tuesday or Wednesday for these, and it will start sometime around noon East. Noon to 2 p.m. East is when we will start. If you want to be able to catch these, I will do at least one a week, for sure. Unless the only time I won't is if I'm very sick, and not even just very sick. I'll probably do even if I'm sick, but if my throat is blocked up. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Also, friendly reminder, I just want to read this real quick. Final Fantasy and Encyclopedia Eorzea Volume 1 is a registered trademark of Square Enix Holdings Co. Limited. And also, you should absolutely support the official release, and you should also grab a copy of EE1 or 2 or 3, or if you don't already have one. But yeah, I will catch you guys all soon. Cheers, everybody.